Hey guys. This is part 5 of What If Naruto was in RWBY. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 2. One as the sun began its daily trek across the horizon, the chill of a cold night still lingering in the air, the 4 teens of Team NPR found themselves up and combat ready whilst most of their fellow students were still asleep in their beds. Of course, seeing as how this was far from being their first time doing so, the teens were wide awake and alert, already used to having to wake up at a time where the sun's light had yet to start warming the earth. With a great inhale, taking in the crisp air of the early morning, Naruto took a sidelong glance at his teammates. "You guys all good?" One last check to ensure that they had the necessities as well as a scroll from their captain that housed anything else they may need, creature comfort or otherwise, and the 3 gave a nod of confirmation. "It's a simple extermination mission, it shouldn't take so long," Ben stated confidently in his usual tone. Giggling, Nora commented, "Yeah, but you never know with Captain Whiskers. We might run into some super ancient Grim or have to fight some rogue group of warriors who know about Kurama and want to use him for some nefarious scheme." While they each had a good laugh at Nora's over-exaggerating, Pira added, "As funny as it is, she isn't wrong." Hanging his head, Naruto pouted. "One time, guys! One time!" Ren raised a brow. "Really? What about that time we were on a mission to escort some books, but ended up finding a scroll from your time and had to protect it from that group of black market mercenaries? Oh. Or when we were supposed to retrieve that super rare flower, and it ended up being guarded by a whole pack of old Beowulfs?" Nora chimed in helpfully. Smiling sheepishly, Pira put another nail in the proverbial coffin. "There was also that mission we had here in Vale when we got sidetracked stopping one of Roman Torchwick's thefts." Nora began to laugh when she and the others turned to see their captain sitting cross-legged on the floor, a depressed aura around him as he poked at the floor. Worried for the blonde, Pira knelt down and attempted to console the downtrodden Jinchuriki whilst Ren simply shook his head at the antics of his friends. Doing a quick 180 in attitude, Naruto was back on his feet, grinning. "Well, this mission will be different. We go in, get rid of some Grim, and we're back before lunchtime." Without a word more, the blonde began marching towards the waiting bullhead, the other 3 following after their danger magnet of a captain. Boarding through the side doors, a familiar voice greeted the team. "Hey kiddies! Off on another mission?" Already familiar with the voice of the man who had become their usual pilot, Naruto threw up a thumbs up. "Yup. Off to exterminate some Grim that have been causing trouble near the smaller villages." Chuckling as he ran over the various checks necessary to make sure they wouldn't crash and burn mid-flight, the older male called back. "Not gonna find some ancient treasure today?" Giggling at the jab at her friend, Pira shook her head. "We're hoping we don't today, Nathan." The now named Nathan laughed as he looked into the back to see a certain blonde sitting in a corner looking like someone had kicked his puppy. "Well, let's get going. Hopefully I can get home to the missus and not have some harrowing story about you kids." Pulling on the controls, the older male pulled the massive piece of metal into the air with practiced ease. A few seconds later and the bullhead was speeding above Vale, the rising sun at its back. From his office at the top of Beacon, Ashbin watched as the vehicle left, carrying 4 of his students to their next mission. So, that was the famous Team NPR? Looking to his side, the silver-haired headmaster took a glance at the imposing and well-dressed figure that stood to his right before turning his gaze back to the city of Vale, now bathed in the warming rays of a rising sun. "Yes. A group of talented and powerful huntsmen and huntresses to be." Arms folded behind him, the well-dressed man made a non-committal hum. "I see. And the blonde, he's the one who supposedly is able to control the very elements themselves?" "Naruto Uzumaki, a natural-born leader. Powerful and experienced beyond his years," Ashbin replied before taking a sip from his ever-present mug of coffee. The man frowned. "I'm sorry, but I saw none of that. It looked like you were deploying a group of children, not a group of trained warriors meant to defend the people of Vale, more so the blonde and the orange-haired girl. The only redeeming grace of that team is Pira Nikos, as far as I can see." Already used to the blunt manner in which his guest spoke, Ashbin gave no verbal response, turning around and bringing up the hologram projector that sat at the middle of his office. With a simple button press, a video feed blurred to life. On it the man watched as the blonde he had previously called childish breathed out a stream of flames that coalesced and formed into the monstrous form of a dragon, the orange-haired girl, plowing her hammer into the ground with enough force to crater it, and either daze or kill several Grimm at once, finally ending with the group of 4 taking down the Deathstalker they had encountered during their entrance exam using a plan formed by the whiskered captain. Before he could form a rebuttal, more clips began to play, this time focused entirely on Team NPR's captain. As well-traveled and experienced as he was, the older male was shocked to see the blue-eyed teen summon a torrential wave of water, sending it crashing down upon several Grimm. Then played a clip of the same teen creating a vacuum of visible air, the winds roaring at such a speed that they stripped the nearby trees of their foliage. Finally came one of the most shocking and awing displays thus far, the blonde wielding a massive ninja star comprised entirely of flames, using it to meet an absolutely massive nevermore hundreds of feet in the air. The detonation of the technique shocked even the experienced huntsman, leaving him wide-eyed as flames consumed the sky in a blaze of beauty and raw power. Ending the series of clips, Ashbin finally replied, "As you can see, young Mr. Uzumaki is extremely capable of leading his teammates, and is quite the impressive force on the battlefield. Just because he does not act as such off the field does not discredit his merits, James." James Ironwood, general of Atlas and its forces, turned his gaze to his longtime friend as he regained his composure. "I see. I had heard the reports but never thought that he was capable of such feats. Now I can see why your council pushed for them to be put onto active duty." Ashbin frowned. "Yes, as unfortunate as that is, Team NPR have performed exceptionally well and have a number of missions already under their belt." Before the two could continue their conversation, the elevator that led to the office opened, revealing an uneasy and somewhat nervous blonde teen dressed in all white armor with only a simple sword sheathed at his side. Sorry to interrupt, sir." Raising a brow at the teen, Ashbin turned to regard Ironwood, recognizing the armor as that of belonging to the huntsman of Atlas. Seeing the curious gaze, Ironwood answered, Yes. Ashbin, I'd like to introduce you to my protege of sorts, John Ark, Nora. Let's give them some hail." Saluting her captain, Nora hefted her hammer up and with a mighty strike slammed it into the ground, producing a crater a few yards deep while also causing a huge amount of rock shards and gravel to be thrown up into the air. Her part done, Nora hopped away only for Naruto to flash through a quick sequence of hand seals. Futon, Detapa, wind release, great breakthrough. The previously airborne chunks of earth were quickly sucked up into the tunnel of high-speed winds, turning them into deadly spikes that pelted the advancing group of Beowulfs. Struck by both the force of the winds and earth shards, the Grimm were unable to do more than stand there and be torn to shreds by the combined attack. As Naruto cancelled the jutsu, leaving a few dozen or so Grimm still standing, barely, Remnant Pira appeared at his side and began to unload a hail of gunfire, picking off the stragglers. Between Pira's eagle-eye-like accuracy and Ren's rapid-fire SMGs, the two made quick work of the leftovers. The team of 4 calmly surveyed the quickly fading bodies of the Grimm, looking for any that could have possibly escaped the 2 widespread attacks, as unlikely as it was. Tossing his hands behind his head, Naruto grinned and began to march back towards the village that had requested the mission. "Well, I'd say that's a job well done." The other 3 members made to follow their captain, amused at his laid-back attitude, only to pause as they felt the ground beneath them begin to shift in an almost imperceptible manner. Looking at each other to confirm what they had just felt, they shrugged when, after a few seconds, nothing else happened, dismissing it as so, etching they had imagined. As they attempted to take a step yet again, Pira's eyes widened as she saw the ground begin to bulge and rise just underneath the feet of their whiskered teammate. "Naruto!" Looking underneath him, the blonde Jinchuriki had to hold back from using every curse word he knew as the gaping maw of a massive snake-like Grimm emerged from the ground. "Not again, da-" was all Naruto could get out before he was swallowed whole by the King Taijutsu. Nora, Ren, and Pira could only stare in shock, unable to comprehend the fact that they had just watched their captain be consumed by a Grimm as easily as one would swallow a pill. The Taijutsu, turning its burning gaze on them, licking its lips in a display of hunger, snapped the teens out of it, forcing them to prepare themselves to fight off the beast that had just claimed the life of their blonde friend and teammate not even a few seconds ago. The massive slithering creature made to lunge at them, ready to eat them as easily as it had Naruto, only for it to stop midway, a look of pain and irritation suddenly etched on its face. The teens began to back up slowly as the Grimm coughed up a cloud of black smoke, looking quite uncomfortable. To the remaining members of Team NPR's surprise, a familiar blade pierced through the body of the King Taijutsu, shining with gore. In a vicious display of brutality, the blade cut a bloody swath around the circumference of the snake Grim, lopping it in half. Standing amidst a pile of fluids and gore, still holding the blade of Hino Ishii in one hand, and panting in what looked to be frustration, Naruto glared at the remains of the fading Taijutsu. I, really, hate snakes. The uproarious laughter of a certain busted blonde rang throughout the cafeteria as she and the rest of Team RWBY listened to Nora excitedly detail their latest mission, putting a lot of focus on the fact that Naruto had briefly been on his way to becoming the appetizer for a hungry Grim. Said Whisker Teen angrily poked at his tray of food as the story was told. EW. That is just revolting. Wise gagged out, not at all pleased with the imagery. Blake, knowing of Naruto's less than stellar luck when it came to missions, shook her head and asked, "What did you mean by again?" Not having caught that detail before, the group of friends turned to the Jinchuriki in curiosity. Knowing there was no way he could escape the curiosity of not just Blake, but Yang, Pira, and RWBY, Naruto sighed as he began to explain the beginning of his path to the dislike of anything remotely serpentine. Every few years or so, something called the Chunin exams would happen. While most thought of it as a way to test a village's genin to see if they were ready for the responsibility of being a Chunin, it was apparently a substitute for war. It was where each village would send the best of their genin teams to show off the strengths of its shinobi so they could earn more clients, as well as warn the other villages. As far as I know, it was supposed to be 3 trials that tested us on what the village hosting it thought were important for being a Chunin, with the last event being a tournament with all of the Kage, daimyo, and nobles attending. Not really having paid enough attention during his time to know the full history of the exams, Naruto waved his hand nonchalantly. Anyways, when it came time for Konoha to host it, my sensei nominated me and my teammates to participate. The first test was some stupid written exam where the whole point was to cheat and not get caught. The second part took place in this creepy forest code-named Training Ground 44, or the Forest of Death. The rest of the group, who had been listening in rapt attention, pulled back at hearing the name of the training ground. There was no way a village run by trained assassins would call a training area the Forest of Death without damn good reason. Well, that's not ominous at all. RWBY nervously chuckled. Yeah, your home village really knows how to name them. Yang added, out of sheer curiosity. Ren asked, why exactly was it called the Forest of Death? Scratching his head, Naruto sheepishly admitted, I actually don't know. Sweat drops all around. The blonde was quick to add, but it might have had to do with the fact that it was full of man-eating plants bigger than most trees, tigers twice the size of normal ones, and bears as big and scary as any Ursa Major. Or the flesh-eating leeches the size of dogs. Or the poisonous plants that took up most of the area. Or okay, we get it. There was a good reason it was called the Forest of Death. Wise shouted, shivering in fear at the idea of such a place existing. Seeing the horrified, disgusted, and uncomfortable looks on everyone's faces, Naruto decided to move on. Well, the objective of the test was to gather 2 scrolls, one you were given at the start and the other you had to take from an enemy team and deliver to the tower at the middle of the forest. We had 5 days to do that. It would have gone okay if not even an hour into the test I was separated from my team by some ninjutsu. Next thing I know is I'm coming to in the middle of nowhere. Turn around and bam! I'm in the stomach of some asshole snake. PFT, W what? Yang asked, trying her hardest to not break down into a fit of side-aching laughter. Yo! RWBY said aloud, voicing what most of them were thinking. Palm to face, Blake asked. I don't want to know, but how in the world did you get out? It was only then that Naruto began to grin cheekily. Simple, I made so many clones that the scaled bastard exploded. Wow. The black and red-haired leader of Team RWBY voiced, sticking her tongue out in disgust. I have to agree with RWBY, that is beyond disgusting. Weiss said, looking a little green in the face. I love you too, partner. The youngest of group proclaimed, attempting to pounce on the opportunity to grow closer to the frigid heiress. No, was Weiss' cold rejection. Ignoring the usual banter between the two, Rin shook his head. So these exams were a normal occurrence? Naruto shrugged casually, not as thrown off by the idea of throwing a bunch of adolescents into a kill or be killed test that tested the limits of their mental fortitude, all for the glory and pride of a village. Yup. Your time really was insane, Foxy. Yang spoke up. Having lived through it, Naruto shrugged again. Not really. I mean, me and my teammates had only been together for a few months when we participated and we came out alive. A few months? Weiss questioned, knowing that Naruto's old team hadn't been the most functional. Worry etched onto her features, Pira added. How could your sensei have thought that was a good idea? I understand it was a different time, but to throw you into such a dangerous exam with so little preparation seems irresponsible. Instead of being offended, Naruto chuckled. That's a pretty spot-on description of Kakashi-sensei. He taught me a lot and was always dependable and a powerful ninja, but he wasn't exactly the best role model. Used to go around reading this porn book called Ika Ika Paradise. Blushing at the memory of when he had told of her what the book was, Blake questioned. Isn't that the series your godfather wrote? Having forgot that he had told the raven-haired teen that little tidbit, Naruto began to blush. Heh. Yeah, Ero-sennin was the one who wrote the Ika Ika series. Wait, so your sensei was super into reading some adult books that your godfather was responsible for writing? Ruby asked, a blush staining her own cheeks now. Hanging his head in shame, the student of two perverts could only nod his head. The table erupted into laughs at the expense of the blonde Uzumaki. Geez whiskers, trained by two huge perverts? I don't know if I feel safe around you anymore. Yang teased. I'm not a pervert. Naruto huffed impudently, wrapping her arms around her fellow blonde in such a way that his face ended up dangerously close to her chest. Yang continued. Don't worry, even if Blake and Pira turn you away because of you being a perv, you'll always have me. Being so close to the source of many leering eyes, Naruto could nothing but sputter and blush heavily, unable to form a coherent thought. Yang! Do that stuff when we're not in public! Weiss called out, turning her head away. My eyes! Ruby cried out. Ren was meanwhile trying his hardest to hold back a struggling Nora. No! We can't let her ruin the shipping! We still don't have a name for it yet! Blushing at the implication, Pira questioned her teammate. What do you mean shipping? Nora turned to regard the redhead as if she was explaining the most obvious thing in the world. You and Naruto as a couple, duh! All the cutest couples have one. Now help me stop Yang! You have to defend your man. By this point Pira's normally fair cheeks were close to matching her hair. What? He's not, we're not. You know, I feel like Blake would be better suited for him. Weiss added suddenly, surprising everyone. Now it was Blake's turn to blush. Huh. The Schnee heiress leaned back and folded her arms. Well, it's like they say opposites attract, right? Besides, Blake might actually be able to calm him down. Before any of the involved parties could get a word in, Ruby decided to throw her own 2 cents in. Opposites may attract, but I think Yang and Naruto are like 2 peas in a pod. As the group of teens descended into a debate over the love affairs of their friends, Naruto couldn't help but to wonder, who would I choose? Hey, look who it is, my favorite customer! A grinning Jeff greeted from behind the counter of the store. Seeing a familiar red-cloaked teen following close behind, the tattooed store owner added, And you brought the weapon nut too! Don't be mean to the customers! A female voice admonished playfully. Laughing at the pair, Naruto greeted the couple. Hey Jeff. Hey Griffin. How's Millie? Standing to the right of the mustached achievement hunter was his equally tattooed and beautiful wife, Griffin. Naruto had met the woman on one of his many trips to the weapons store, and had been impressed by how easily she matched the antics and overall madness that was the group of man-children that was Achievement Hunter. Jeff grinned. Probably kicking Gavin's ass right about now. Rolling her eyes at her husband, Griffin asked, So what brings you two here today? Another shopping spree? Blushing in embarrassment at the amount of money she had been spent the last time she was at the store, Ruby kicked at the ground with her boots. No. Shaking his head, Naruto reached into his jacket to bring out a simple scroll that he tossed to Jeff. The usual delivery of sealing scrolls and exploding tags. Stowing it underneath the counter for later, the head of the crew sighed. You know, I thought those slips of yours would be selling like hot cakes, but everyone seems to have taken a shine to the scrolls instead. Ruby interjected. Well, it does kind of make sense. After all, most of us use dust if we need a little more firepower, and Naruto is the only one who knows how to use them with his kunai. The blonde former shinobi shrugged. She's right. Besides, I hardly use them myself these days. I've been using Hai no Ishi a lot more, especially now that it has some really nasty long-range uses. Griffin nodded. Yeah, I remember seeing Gavin having a field day modding that weapon of yours. You still haven't told me what it is that they did to it," RWBY cried out indignantly. Chuckling, Naruto decided to take pity on the weapons enthusiast. "You know how I can use Hai no Ishi to cast some jutsu?" Remembering the first time she had seen the blonde use the staff back during their entrance exam, the silver-eyed teen nodded. "Well, that's because I originally made it in a way that I could funnel my chakra through it. I don't know exactly how. Kurama said something about chakra treating the metal, but anyways I just had Gavin carve out a spiral groove inside the staff part that hides the blade. By pushing chakra down the blade, the grooves form the chakra into a bullet and give it the spin like the barrel of any gun." The proverbial light finally clicked in RWBY's head. "I get it. Instead of using some form of combustion that most of our weapons use, yours is completely dependent on the force and amount of power you put into it. You can custom make your own shells and even make them non-lethal by choice." "Yeah," Ryan was going on and on about how ingenious the science behind it is or some crap. Kept saying your weird semblance was so amazing. Jeff casually waved off. RWBY was all too happy to agree. "It is though. Naruto has huge amounts of energy to use, so he has a near-endless supply of bullets that he can easily change to fit his need. Plus the bonus that he never has to actually reload his gun. Then there's the fact that since he can turn his energy into the elements, he could do the same with his shells. The possibilities are endless." Naruto, Jeff, and even Griffin began to sweat drop as the young teen's eyes turned into stars and drool began to flow from her mouth like a fountain. "Hey, I just mopped the floor," Jeff protested. With a blush, RWBY reclaimed her senses and sheepishly apologized. "So what's going on with you and Cinder? I didn't know you were into older women, Naruto," Griffin teased. "God damn it, Michael! Stop telling everybody that I like Cinder," Naruto shouted out, a blush on his cheeks. The only response he got was the signature uproarious laughter of said member coming from the back room of the shop. "You like Cinder?" RWBY asked, looking equal parts shocked and disappointed. While Naruto tried to vehemently deny that, the younger teen had lost herself in her own imagination. "But then you'll never date Yang and we'll never be brother and sister. It would have been perfect." "Oh ho, so Blondie's trying to play the field, eh?" Jeff asked, whittling his eyebrows suggestively. "No wonder you wear all those rings," Griffin accused, joining in on the teasing. At this point, with everyone either laughing at him or trying to pair him up with someone, Naruto could do little more than bang his head on the countertop. Why me? While he wasn't exactly happy about it, Naruto knew he was a danger magnet. He knew that, for whatever reason, he would eventually find himself tangled up in some kind of grand mess, whether he liked it or not. That said, he found himself quite happy with his life here in Remnant. Sure, he missed his precious people, dearly so, but thanks to the new bonds he had formed with his own teammates, and the girls of Team RWBY, the grief and sadness was slowly being healed. Besides that, he knew for a fact that none of his precious people from his time would have wanted him to sit on his ass and sulk. That was Sasuke's thing after all. Even more to the point, despite having been in Remnant for a year and some months now, he could still vividly remember the look on Kakashi's masked face and his words as the Jounin performed his kamui. "You've done so much for us, now it's time we do for you. Go, live your life, the life you never got to. Be happy. Find people who will love you and never stop being you. Minato-sensei and Kushina-chan would be proud of who you've grown to be, I know I am." Even with blood pouring from his body, his implanted Sharingan eye spinning madly as he used it to perform its signature Jukuken ninjutsu, space-time ninja technique, the silver-haired leader of Team 7 had managed to pull off that eye smile of his. All that in mind, Naruto would be damned if he let everyone from his time down by wallowing in self-loathing. Just wasn't his thing. However, staring down at the item laid out atop Professor Ashpin's desk, the blonde couldn't help but feel his heart tighten, his cerulean orbs misting over as a myriad of memories hit him at once. Sat opposite to his headmaster, and a man whom he learned was the general of the Kingdom of Atlas, the blonde Jinchuriki could feel his heart racing as his eyes traced every detail of the item, trying as hard as he could to find any discrepancy that could point towards this all being fake. Deep down, though, he knew there would be no such thing. There was no denying it. Laid flat out on Ashpin's desk was a tattered piece of cloth. Attached to the torn and clearly ancient piece of fabric was a metal plate bearing a symbol Naruto was all too familiar with. After all, it was a symbol he had probably worn since he was a child, a symbol that, to him, meant home and so much more. A symbol he had thought he would never see again after being sent centuries into the future. Cerulean eyes gazed forlornly at the Hittite forehead protector, emblazoned with the symbol of his home, Kanahagakur. Despite the many cracks, dings, and layers of rust that covered it, Naruto was easily able to make out the familiar leaf with ease. What is this, Professor Ojban? Naruto barely managed to choke out, near drowning in memories. Staring into the hazy eyes of his student, Ojban explained. It is a relic that General Ironwood came across during his travels and has since kept. Seeing as how you were one not too unlike it, I found it pertinent to ask you if you had any knowledge about what it was specifically. It was at this point that the Atlas leader spoke up. I happened upon it during my younger years on a mission here in Vale actually. Despite the difficulty of the mission, my team and I managed to complete it without undue damage, and so I've kept it as something of a lucky charm. However, you seem to be much more knowledgeable about its purpose. Despite knowing that the two huntsmen were doing this not out of a curiosity for the item, but in a bid to try and have him divulge more of his secrets, Naruto was hard-pressed and much too distracted to lie. They're called Hittite, or forehead protectors. While they were meant to do that, their most important function was to serve as a kind of ID. Raising a brow, Ojban folded his hands in front of his face and leaned forward. An ID? How so? Snapping out of his reverie and turning to match the steely gaze of Ironwood as well as the curious one of Ojban, Naruto came up with the best cover he could. From what I learned from my mom's diary, the ancient villages used them as a way to signify who you allied with, which village you would live and die for. Ironwood seemed unimpressed. A rather simple and easily fooled system, no? After all, wouldn't it be easy to simply don an enemy's headband and infiltrate their village? Naruto shrugged. People held more pride for their village and home than that. Even those who abandoned their villages still wore their headband, scratching it out to show that they had literally cut ties with their home. Narrowing his eyes, James stepped up and continued. And how exactly did your mother know this? How did you get your hands on one? To my knowledge, very few of these items even exist, most of them on display in museums. Seeing where the man was attempting to go with his questioning, Naruto narrowed his eyes and defiantly stared the general down. My family took care to tell the children stories of that time. Even when our numbers dwindled down, the stories were still told. My mom just happened to write them down. Turning his gaze elsewhere, the blonde continued. As for this headband, I found it amongst the ruins of Uzushio, and seeing as I'm the last of my clan, I took it, and now wear it as a way to show my pride in my name. Knowing how his friend was, and seeing the anger at being disrespected by someone he viewed as below him, Ojban interrupted. Yes, well, the main reason we've showed you this is because we want to see if we can find any more artifacts such as these where General Ironwood found his. In light of that, we're organizing another expedition with you and your team again. Gritting his teeth at how the man had claimed something he had no right to, a headband that had to be earned, not found and taken, Naruto decided to bite the proverbial bullet and nodded his head. When do we depart? Seeing the anger in the young teen's eyes, Ojban raised a brow but nonetheless answered. 2 days from now. Professors Panathenia and Oblek will be accompanying you again as well. Ironwood jumped in. And I will be sending one of my own as well. If anything is found, it could be beneficial for all the kingdoms. Clenching his fists, Naruto silently nodding his head before rising from his seat. Without a word more or a look back, the Uzumaki Jinchuriki took the elevator from Ojban's office. Disrespectful, emotional, and far too volatile. On top of that, he lied straight to our faces. How could you simply let him go, Ojban? How could you possibly think it's a good idea to keep him around? Ironwood questioned. Still staring at the spot the aforementioned teen had sat, Ojban waited a moment, composing his thoughts before turning to observe the city of Vale bathed in the beautiful hues of a setting sun. After a few minutes, the bespectacled headmaster answered, That is all true, and it is because of those same reasons that I keep him around. Naruto Uzumaki is different. He is like his namesake, a force of nature and an unyielding entity that leaves nothing as it was. He will bring change to these times, and with those in the shadows moving more and more each day, he will be a key player in the coming days. Deep in the emerald forest, the sounds of wood being snapped and broken echo throughout the otherwise eerily silent forest. With a snap of his arm, Naruto caused the trunk of yet another tree to explode in a shower of splinters and wood chips, taking out a huge chunk of the tree's body in the process. Looking around, one would find the other trees in the clearing in a similar state, barely standing with only a sliver of their trunk keeping them up. Those younger and thinner trees were not so lucky, felled by a single enraged fist and now laid out on the floor of the forest. The critters that roamed the forest and called it home were nowhere to be found, having vacated the area, staying as far away as possible with their instincts telling them that something dangerous had entered their home. Even the grim, creatures naturally drawn to feelings of negativity, felt it prudent to keep their distance, the feeling of something hanging thick in the air like a dense fog being enough to keep them wary. With a roar of anger, another tree was snapped in half, falling to the ground with a loud thud that reverberated throughout the area. "I'm surprised you haven't attracted a horde of Grimm to you yet," a smoky voice commented from the shadows. Rising to his full height and brushing off the wood chips and splinters from his jacket, Naruto regained some sense of himself and replied, "They're scared. They can feel the chakra I'm using and they know I'm stronger than them." Sauntering out of the shadows, Cinder admired the sight of a ragged Naruto. His hands still clenched into fists, his blonde mane even more wild than was normal, and a hint of crimson bleeding into his sapphires gave him the appearance of a beast on the edge, only a step away from unleashing hell on those dumb enough to have incurred his wrath. It was enticing to her. My, someone's cocky," the amber-eyed woman commented. Naruto huffed. "You and I both know what I can do, and I'm sure Torchwick told you all about the incident on the dock." Cinder only smirked. "Indeed. Taking down 2 fully armored bullheads in a few seconds? And with arms made entirely out of chakra? You Jinchuriki truly are forces to be reckoned with." A frown marred Naruto's whiskered cheeks, not liking the reference to the fact that he and his brothers and sisters had been born and made into weapons of war without their consent. Sure, his mother and father had sealed Kurama into him in the hopes that he would use the power being a Biju container granted him for good, but that wasn't how others viewed them. Jinchuriki were not human, merely tools to be wielded by their Kage, a sword and shield against their enemies. Despite his close bond to Sarutobi Gigi, Naruto knew that, had an event arose in which he was needed, the third would have been forced to use him as such. "What do you want, Cinder?" Naruto snarled, his already poor mood soured by those thoughts. Knowing she would have to tread carefully lest she ignite the flames of the teen's fury, and the Biju he contained, the femme fatale frowned. "I heard that you and your T are being sent on a mission to find more artifacts from the time of your ancestors." In a moment of clarity, Naruto remembered a rather important detail. "I never told her that I'm actually from that time. She thinks that I'm just a descendant of the old shinobi or something." Deciding that it was best the grand schemer continued to believe that to be the case, the former shinobi raised a brow. "And? I also know that Ironwood is sending one of his lackeys to keep an eye on you," Cinder continued. "So? It's not like whoever it is will cause any problems for me," Naruto confidently stated. Sauntering closer, the raven-haired beauty raked a nail across the former shinobi's cheek, tracing one of his whisker marks. "I can help. I could pull some strings and send Neo or Emerald with you and have them keep whoever it is off your back and let you do some real exploring." Despite the pleasurable shiver running down his spine, Naruto had been trained well enough to be a little wary of the woman despite knowing her ultimate goal. "And what would you want out of it?" Smirking as she stared into the striking blue eyes of the taller teen, Cinder replied, "Nothing too outlandish, just the answers to some questions I've had concerning your ancestors." Naruto may not have had the years of experience that his mentors had, or even the few years that Cinder had on him, but even he could tell that there was something off about the situation. Cinder was many things, and none of them entailed her being so simple. She had webs upon interlocking webs spun around her. She may have told him more about her end goal than she had most anybody else, but there was no way she would want something as simple as a few questions answered. There had to be more to it. "That's it? No favors? No asking me to steal some powerful tool or something?" Naruto asked in disbelief. Cinder only offered a smile. "No. Just some answers is all." "So, do you accept?" Still leery of the deal coming back to bite him in the ass, the blonde huntsman in training frowned but nodded his head. "Fine, but I'd like Neo. She may creep me out, but that's better than Emerald's crappy attitude." Cinder said nothing about the jab at one of her underlings, shrugging instead. "Neo will be happy to hear that. You two have been getting along well." Recalling the rash of pranks the two had been pulling as of late, Naruto sheepishly began to chuckle. "Yeah, you could say that." With a smirk, Cinder turned to leave, that ever-present sway of her hips attracting even Naruto's gaze. Before she fully passed into the shadows of the darkened forest, the amber-eyed woman turned her head. "Oh, by the way, that Faunus girl is looking for you." Without a word more, Cinder was gone. Scratching his head in puzzlement, Naruto questioned that last tidbit. Blake's looking for me? How did Cinder know that? Nothing is quite right about that woman, interrupted a familiar gruff voice. Turning to regard his Biju partner who was situated amidst the branches of a nearby tree, Naruto nodded. Yeah, I know. Here's just something off about her. Switching his crimson gaze from where Cinder had left, Kurama stared at his container. And yet you still took that deal with her. Clenching his fists, Naruto growled out. I didn't have a choice. Wherever Ironwood found that headband has to have some clues about what happened to Konoha or where it could be now, and I wouldn't be able to do anything with his lackey breathing down my neck. Need I remind you that you are capable of making corporeal copies of yourself that can freely interact with the world, and hundreds of them at that. Not only that, you have the ability to change your appearance at will. Kurama bit back. But what about trying to keep all this a secret? Naruto challenged. The QB scoffed. Did you really think that would last long? I'm honestly surprised you've made it this far without shouting it to the heavens. Naruto growled in response. What's that supposed to mean, you furry asshole? Kurama smirked. Please, you were never good at keeping a low profile. You stuck out like a sore thumb in our time, and you do even more now in this day and age. Hey! I'm damn good at being stealthy when I need to. The blonde Jinchuriki protested. The kitsune-like chakra monster waved a paw dismissively. I wasn't talking about that. Loath as I am to admit it, stealth is probably one of your strongest points. However, keeping your head down and not getting involved into every shitstorm that comes your way is not your forte. Naruto grumbled. Not my fault trouble finds me. Chuckling at the misfortune of his container, Kurama hopped down from his perch. Besides, you've already used Senin Moto in front of 2 professors, spammed Kage Bunshin in areas where Ashban can see, used my chakra in public, you're selling sealing scrolls and explosive tags to the public, and still keep throwing jutsu out like they're going out of style. Face it, it's a little late to try and keep it all under wraps. Throwing his hands behind his head, Naruto raised a brow. So what? Should I just tell Ashban what he wants to know? Go around calling myself a shinobi huntsman? Kurama snorted. Don't be an idiot. That woman has given you an even better lie than the one we had before. Use it to your advantage. After all, the ones who need to know already. Keep it like that. Casually waltzing through the emerald forest, unafraid of the dangers that called it home, Naruto smiled. What would I have done without you, fuzzbutt? Probably still be running around wearing that kill-me orange jumpsuit and using only 2 techniques over and over again. The Biju snarked. Naruto winced. Was I really that bad? Worse. Chapter 23. As the sun peeked over the horizon, beginning its daily trek across the sky and bathing the planet in its warmth and light, an anxious team and NPR performed one last supply check, wanting to make sure they were prepared for the extended mission that was now upon them. Their last historical expedition out to Yuzushio had been relatively short, their battle with the ancient Nevermore notwithstanding, due to the fact that they actually knew where they were going and what they were looking for, relatively. After all, it was rather hard to miss an entire island. This time, they were heading almost blindly into a forest that remained near entirely uncharted and wild. Atlas General had even explained that his coming into possession of a Konoha Hydeate was pure happenstance, and that he himself had no idea if what they were looking for would be an entire village, or simply a few scattered artifacts that had been unearthed by the natural shifting of the planet and nature. The whole mystery of the mission was only made worse by the fact that Ironwood's finding of the headband had happened almost 20 or so years ago, meaning that whatever could have been there was just as likely to have been moved again amidst the constant, unpredictable changes and shifting of nature. In essence, they very well could be going on a wild goose chase that may well end up amounting to nothing. Then again, with Naruto involved, that wasn't likely to be the case. Are you ready? Pira asked aloud, meaning it in both the physical and emotional sense. After all, the sight of a ruined Yuzushio had been enough to anger him to the point that he had tapped into Kurama's chakra, and that had been the home of his ancestors, a place he was tied to only in blood. It was impossible to predict how he would react if they happened upon the ruins of Konoha, the place where he had been born and grown up in. A home he had fervently aimed to one day lead, a village and people he had literally shed blood, sweat, and tears for. No matter what, Konoha had been his home, the place he would have given his life for. It was a place he had been forced to leave, against his will, while it was beset by a monster of a man after the Biju sealed inside of him. Needless to say, Pira was right to worry about her whiskered friend. I don't know, Naruto admitted, his eyes dimming in just the slightest way. However, for Pira, who could by now read the blonde like a book, it meant that he was quickly losing himself to the memories and guilt that still gnawed at him in the recesses of his mind. While others knew the blonde for his cheerful disposition, around his teammates, and those he was truly close to, he was much more open about the turmoil and thoughts that would run through his mind, something that had only been the exclusive right of his Jiji, Bachan, Kaka-sensei, and Ero-sennin, people whom he trusted above all others. It was endearing to know that Naruto trusted Pira and his teammates in much the same way as he had his pseudo-family. Knowing this, Pira gently placed a hand on his shoulder, pouring all of the conviction and genuine emotion she could into her words. Whatever happens, we're here for you. Ren decided to interject. Pira is right, we're a team. We'll do this as a team, like any of our missions. Nora's bubbly face suddenly popped into view, her cheery grin on her face. Right. We're Team NNPR. Breaking legs and taking names is what we do. Grinning, the vibrancy of his eyes now back in full force, Naruto nodded. You guys are right, nothing's gonna stop us, Tebeo. With a confident stride, Team NNPR turned and made to leave their room, ready to stand as a united front against whatever troubles they were going to meet in the coming days. Stepping out into a hallway, the four teens were surprised to bump into the smiling and sleepy faces of a still pajama-clad Team RWBY. What are you guys doing up this early? Naruto questioned. We came to wish you guys good luck on your mission, duh. Ruby chirped, simultaneously rubbing her eyes in an attempt to appear more awake. With a grin, Yan gave a friendly punch to her fellow blonde's arm. You better not come back all banged up this time, or you'll have to answer to me. Got it, Foxy? No promises, Naruto answered back with his usual grin. Knowing his usual luck, he was right to make such a promise. Rolling her eyes at the blonde, Blake offered a simple smile. Just come back in one piece, all of you. Yeah, don't be too much of a moron. Weiss flippantly added. I can feel the love from here, princess. Naruto's sweat dropped. With the last few waves and hugs, Team NNPR made their exit, walking out into the crisp morning air, greeted by more familiar faces. It is good to see you all up and ready for yet another historical adventure, Professor Oblek exclaimed. Arms crossed, Olive regarded the four teens with a blank stare. Hopefully this one won't involve fighting another Grim older than Vale. Naruto took the dig at his track record with missions in stride. If it does, we'll take it down in record time, right? Ready to show what they were capable of as a team, the rest of Team NNPR gave a confident round of nods. Yeah! We'll annihilate anyone who gets in our way, mwahaha! Nora bellowed. Adjusting his glasses, Oblek replied. Yes, well, before we depart, we still have another person whom will be accompanying us as well. Professor Panathenia frowned in thought. Right. General Ironwood has thought it crucial that he send one of his own with us. Curious as to why the brunette professor seemed to be none too thrilled by the idea of having someone from another kingdom accompany them, Naruto decided to save such questions for later. However, having met the man, Naruto had a few guesses as to why. The general just rubbed him the wrong way. He seemed to be one of those anything and everything for the greater good types, which wasn't necessarily bad. What was bad were the lengths he would go to achieve those ends. All in all, Ironwood just reminded Naruto of that old warhawk, Danzo, a little too much for comfort. Sure, the old shinobi had wanted Konoha to be great, but the bastard had been willing to sacrifice any and everyone to achieve that, even willing to start another war with the other villages to prove that Konoha was the most powerful. That wasn't even mentioning the other deals and moves he had made in the shadows without the permission or knowledge of the Hokage, like the creation of his root division of ANBU. Having briefly shared a team with one of its members, Sai, Naruto could easily see why Sarutobi had originally ordered it to be disbanded. Intentionally robbing young children of any and all emotion bar an extreme loyalty to Danzo and the Leaf Village through harsh brainwashing and conditioning to make the perfect tools was inhumane and went against what the previous Hokage had believed in. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, Kurama intoned. Naruto hummed in response, only sparing the beads currently wrapped around his neck a glance before his attention was drawn to the clacking sound of heels meeting concrete. Turning around, the blonde raised a brow upon seeing Cinder waltzing towards them, Neo at her side. Ah, Ms. Fall. How can we help you? Oblek inquired. Putting on a fake smile, one Naruto could see through by a mile, the amber-eyed woman stretched out her hand, a simple piece of paper held out. Professor Ashbin asked that I hand this to either of you. Raising a brow, Olive grabbed the letter and read through it. Seems that our headmaster has decided to send a member of Team Siameni with us as well. Says she may be of some assistance to us on the mission. Having already disregarded both Panathenia and Oblek, much to the former's ire, Cinder was busying herself by chatting it up with the whiskered captain of NNPR. You'll take care of Neo, right, Naruto? Regarding the diminutive girl currently giving him her signature. On equal amounts adorable and evil. Smile, Naruto's sweat dropped. Yeah, sure. Pira frowned as Cinder glanced at her, giving the redhead a smirk before the raven-haired woman proceeded to stroke Naruto's whiskered cheek in a way that was clearly not meant to be platonic. Come back safe, alright? Naruto, still as blind to anything remotely romantic or sexual, simply grinned. Hell, like something's gonna stop me, Tebeo. Off to the side Ren sighed, prompting Nora to question her longtime friend. What's wrong, Ren? Shaking his head in exasperation, the long-haired teen replied. Naruto just jinxed us. Now we'll definitely run into some kind of trouble. Oh, come on. We can totally beat anything that comes at us. Captain Whiskers is a super awesome ninja. Pira is famous for being kicked, but you have your kung fu, and I have Manghild. Plus we got 2 of our professors and the weird ice cream girl. We got this. Nora bragged. Sorry if I'm late. A voice called out, surprising everyone gathered. Turning around, brows were raised when they saw that the voice belonged to a familiar, to Team NNPR face. Making a poorly hit attempt to whisper, Nora added, I don't know about the new guy though. Ren sighed. Scratching his cheek, Naruto peered at the newcomer. Joan, right? The armor-clad blonde sweat dropped. No, it's John actually. Professor Panathenia raised a brow. You're the one General Ironwood is sending with us? Standing up straight, the teen gave a salute. John Arc of Atlas, ma'am. For a moment the brunette professor seemed to scrutinize the blonde before shrugging. Very well. Since we're all here, best we leave. Everyone prepared? We will be gone for quite the length of time, and I hope you've all prepared for an extended stay outside the bounds of any major city. When no one spoke up, the bespectacled professor turned on her heel and made for the waiting bullhead, the others following suit, piling into the large aircraft. However, seeing as how he was the only one carrying a large pack, John asked the obvious. Did you guys not bring any supplies? Naruto just grinned and pulled out a small scroll, spinning it on his fingertip. Everything we need is right in here. Oh. Is that one of those scrolls that's supposed to be able to store a bunch of stuff? John asked curiously. Nora chose that moment to pipe in. Yup. And you're looking at the original maker of them, Captain Whiskers. Naruto could only chuckle lightly at the less than impressive nickname his teammate had given him. Uzumaki Naruto, captain of Team NNPR. Offering a friendly smile, Pira introduced herself to the Atlesian. Pira Nikos. Lyren. The raven-haired teen said evenly. And I'm Nora Valkyrie, queen of the castle. The exuberant hammer-wielder cheered. Seeing as how Neo was not going to verbally introduce herself, Naruto spoke up. And this is Neapolitan. Doesn't really talk much, but don't piss her off. In turn, the ice cream-themed girl gave her signature smirk, complete with a blink to change the colors of each eye, causing John to feel all kinds of uncomfortable. Nice to meet you all. Hopefully we can work well together. It had been a few hours since the group had departed from Beacon. It had also been some time since any sign of technology had been seen, the bullhead having left the bounds of Vale's walls soon after its departure. Having made a similarly long trip before, Team NNPR had taken to their chosen way of passing the time. Nora was snoozing away, using Ren, who himself looked to be sleeping, as a pillow. Pira had made herself comfortable against the side of her friend and was actually reading a book she had asked to borrow from said blonde, that being the tale of the utterly gutsy shinobi. Naruto was likewise busy reading over a scroll of some sort, the contents of which only he, and possibly Olive, could decipher. Neo, while having initially used messing with Kurama as a means to stave off boredom, had since fallen asleep, using Naruto's lap as a pillow. Said Biju was now curled around his container's neck, tail lazily swinging to and fro. John had at first used the time to polish his weapon of choice, a rather unassuming sword, but was now using the time to quietly observe each of the other teens across from him. He had seen the aftermath of what his fellow blonde could do and had been told by Ironwood that he should pay extra attention to him, but for the life of him, the blonde couldn't figure out why. Sure, he seemed strong, but no more so than any of his teammates. Though that was also not all that unremarkable when one considered that Piranikos was on the same team. That was also a little odd to him. While he himself didn't really care all that much that the redhead was quite famous for her achievements as a huntress in training, he had seen a few of her battles and heard how intelligent she was. By all rights, she should be the one leading her team. And yet she was not. What was so special about this Naruto that had caught the eye of not only Ojpin, but his own headmaster and general as well? "All right, guys. Gonna be landing here. Prepare to depart," the bullhead captain called from the cockpit. A few moments later, and the group was stretching out their limbs, clearing themselves of any kinks that had developed during the course of their flight. As they did so, the younger teens all surveyed the area around them, finding themselves standing on the outskirts of what looked to be a small village. A closer look showed that, while the forests claimed a vast majority of the area around the village, the buildings seemed a little more modern than those of the ones they had encountered back during their fiasco of a first mission. Hopefully this also meant that the people would be different as well. Spinning around, Professor Oblek addressed the teens. "This will be our temporary home base for the duration of our mission. We will be taking up residence in a nearby lodge. Any questions? No? Then let us venture forth." And just like that, the spastic green-haired professor was gone. Shaking her head at her colleague, Panathenia motioned for the group to follow her to the village. "You kids have fun. When you're all ready to go, I'll be right here," the bullhead captain called out. Naruto nodded. "Thanks for the ride, Nate." Walking into the village proper, the group was greeted by a waiting Oblek, 3 others, 2 men and a woman standing with him. "Allow me to introduce the 3 of the resident huntsmen who will be our guides during our stay in their village," the bespectacled teacher spoke. "Name's Marcus Flint," the first man said simply. Garbed in a simple gray long sleeve with what looked to be some sort of bow and arrow stitched in white on the bottom left, faded black pants, black boots, and fingerless gloves, he seemed rather plain. Though his pale complexion contrasted greatly with the shock of deep ebony locks that was tied into a simple ponytail. His honey-brown eyes examined them with just the smallest hints of disinterest, like he'd rather be doing something else. "Hey there! I'm Arya Kanta," the young woman greeted cheerily. She looked to be only a few years older than them, and wore a simple white tank top with a dark purple jacket covering her arms and shoulders. Emblazoned on each of the jacket's shoulders was an elegant depiction of a conductor's baton colored in a contrasting white. A belt styled as a black bow tie wrapped around her waist and held up her black pants, though, seeing how well they formed to her curves, the belt was more for show than function. Her vibrant blue eyes stood out from her peach skin tone, while her deep brown tresses framed her face in a Heim style. The eldest of the 3, no doubt the leader of the group, gave a firm nod in their direction. "And I'm Gray Ballast." Standing a full head taller than his comrades, the now introduced Gray cut an imposing figure with eyes of a hardened charcoal gray and matching short, cropped hair. A dark, forest green overcoat fell to just above his calves, the sleeves of which were rolled halfway up his forearms. A black shirt covered his chest, the image of 2 poles forming an X, in the same shade of green as his coat covering his upper chest. Dark brown pants covered the upper portion of the steel-toed black boots he wore, tying his outfit together. The older male scanned the teens and continued in his gruff voice. "While you're here, we'd much appreciate the help defending the village. Grim aren't a huge problem, but the occasional roaming herd can be troublesome to deal with. In exchange, we'll be letting you use our maps and knowledge of the surrounding area to help you find whatever it is you're looking for. Or I could just flood the area with a bunch of clones," Naruto muttered to himself. Having heard him, Pyrrha smiled and shook her head in amusement. Having first-hand experience at how helpful the blonde's clones could be, she did have to wonder why he didn't do just that. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw John shift, reminding her of his presence, serving to also answer her question. Naruto was no doubt trying to keep Ironwood from finding out about his abilities and ties to the shinobi era. While never having met the man herself, she could say she wasn't exactly fond of him. She and the others had seen how Naruto had looked after the meeting with the Atlesian general and their own headmaster. It had been abundantly clear from his bedraggled appearance that her partner had gone out to release some steam. Getting the abridged version of the talk, she couldn't blame Naruto either. What right did Ironwood have to question the whiskered teen? Had it been Ojpin, she would have understood. After all, they were technically speaking his soldiers. However, Ironwood could make no such claim. While he was indeed a highly influential man, he was not in his home territory. No, he was in Beacon, a guest in the Kingdom of Vale. He had no right to attempt to interrogate Naruto, especially in the way he had tried to do so. Shaking off those thoughts, Pira smiled when she saw Naruto turn to her with a grin. The brightness of the smile served to remind her that, while the city life wasn't a bother to the blonde, he was still far more accustomed to being in places where nature and greenery were much more prevalent. After all, he had grown up in a village not unlike this one, a place surrounded by trees and the wildlife. You really enjoy places like this, don't you? Pira asked, though she already knew the answer. Plastering on a smile that split his face, Naruto nodded. You bet. Nothing beats being close to nature like this. Good, because we will be spending extended lengths of time even deeper in possibly uncharted territory, Professor Panathenea interjected. Gesturing to her side, the brunette woman continued. Now if you'd please follow Ms. Kanta, she'll show you where we'll be staying while in the village. Turning to see Nora animatedly chatting with the young huntress, the two chuckled. Seems as though Nora's already made a friend. Nodding as they moved to join the others, Naruto caught sight of Rin sighing. Looks like Rin isn't too thrilled though. Rin in turn saw the two chuckling at his misfortune as Nora and Arya started a heated debate on sweets, and could only come up with one way to sum up the situation: troublesome. So this was the spot Ironwood found the headband? Naruto asked with a raised brow. Looking at the area around them, no one could blame the blonde for his incredulity. There was nothing remarkable about where they were currently standing. Sure, it was a rather spacious clearing with a few fallen trees lying about, but they had encountered several others like it on the way. Even when Naruto and Kurama scanned the area with their extra senses, they could find nothing that stood out. It was simply another clearing. Yes, it seems that there is nothing out of the ordinary here, Oblek said, stating the obvious. Shaking her head, Olive spoke up. We knew that would more than likely be the case. For now we'll set up a temporary camp here, pair up, and spread out. We should still be in range for radio signal, so if any of you find anything of note, alert the rest of us. Opening up a single scroll, Naruto summoned out several already made tents. Seeing how quickly and easy his fellow blonde had made it seem, John had to wonder how the thing worked. From what he could understand, the basis of the whole item revolved around the archaic drawings on it. However, said drawings were like nothing any of Atlas Best had seen, the closest comparison being the glyphs of the Shinii family. However, Naruto looked and acted nothing like any Shinii he had met. Another thing to add to the mystery of Naruto. Looking around himself, John could see that the rest of the group had already paired up, assuming what was probably their usual formations. Naruto with Pira, Rin handling Nora, and the two professors together. Once that clicked in his mind, John remembered who the last member of their group was, almost having forgotten about her. Turning, he could only smile unsurely. Well, guess it's me and you, Neo. The parasol wielder only responded with one of her signature smiles, only serving to unnerve the Atlesian even more. Heh, right. Not much of a talker, huh? Neo simply blinked, her eyes changing color. Why me? I feel kind of bad that we left John to Neo like that. Pira casually commented, brushing a strand of hair from her vision. While she didn't mind the forestry, the crimson-haired teen was not exactly a fan of the humidity that permeated the air due to the density of the foliage. Naruto, having sealed away his jacket in a bid to keep cool, shrugged. It was kind of the whole reason Neo even came in the first place. Pira had to raise a brow at that. What do you mean? I thought she was here to lend another hand. Grimacing as he realized that he had never let his teammates in on his little deal with Cinder, Naruto elaborated. Well, like I said, she kind of is here to help. It's just that her way of helping is to keep that guy distracted. I know that you don't want to reveal anything to Ironwood, and I know that John was sent with us to keep an eye on you, but I don't think Ashbin would send someone to run interference for you. Pira stated, confident in her assumptions. Scratching the back of his head, Naruto admitted. You're right. Ashbin didn't do it. Cinder did. Baffled by the answer, the invincible girl stopped dead in her tracks, regarding her teammate with a curious gaze. What do you mean Cinder did? How could Cinder send one of her teammates with us without Ashbin's permission? The whiskered captain answered honestly. I actually don't know. She said she could pull some strings and make it happen. Pira frowned at the carelessness of her partner. I'm sorry, Naruto, but something is really off about Cinder, and I don't like it. I know, and trust me, I don't like it either, but it wasn't something I could just pass up. Naruto admitted. Deciding to drop the matter for now, the two turned to survey the area they were in, having stopped paying attention at some point during their talk. Only seeing more green in every direction, the pair sighed, Pyrrha hopefully adding, "Maybe the others are having better luck than us. Are we there yet?" "No." "Are we there yet?" "No." "Do you have any snacks?" "No, we left most of it back at the clearing." "Are we there yet?" "No, we're not, Nora." "Wanna play a game, Run?" "No, because we have to keep an eye out for anything out of the ordinary." "You think Pyrrha and Captain Whiskers have kissed yet?" "Troublesome." "So where are you from?" "Ha, cool. Is it anything like this?" "Yeah, Atlas is a little different from Vale, but I like it." "Well, I'm super grateful for General Ironwood. After all, he's the one who's helped me get this far. I don't know what would have happened if I'd tried to get into somewhere like Beacon." "You're not even listening to me, are you? So, is that your natural hair color, or do you think it was a good idea to send the students off in pairs like that?" Oblek asked, somewhat casually. Stepping over a fallen branch, Panathenea shrugged. "They handled an ancient grim that could create tornadoes and was as big as one of Ironwood's warships. I think they'll be fine." "You're hoping that Uzumaki's uncanny ability to cause things that would normally never happen will lead us to what we're looking for much faster, aren't you?" Oblek surmised. Seemingly unashamed at her tactic, his younger brunette co-worker continued to move forward, only sparing a barely heard "possibly" as a response. Oblek simply shrugged before following after his colleague. "Do you think we'll find Konoha out here?" Pyrrha asked, moving aside a tangle of low-hanging vines. Naruto answered honestly. "I wouldn't doubt it. After I had found that first Akatsuki ring, I would send out clones with Kurama to scour the nearby areas, remember? They never went this far outside of Vale's bounds, but they did find a few things left over from the smaller villages that weren't too far from Konoha." "Did you ever wonder if Yang was right?" Pyrrha asked suddenly. Raising a brow, Naruto asked the obvious. "What do you mean?" "Well, Yang made that joke about Vale itself being where Konoha was. Couldn't it be possible?" The huntress to be elaborated. Turning his attention back to their surroundings, Naruto shook his head. "No. Me and Kurama originally thought that could be the case, but Vale is missing a few things that would make it obvious that it was Konoha, even a future version of it." Curious, Pyrrha questioned her partner. "What do you mean?" "You've mentioned the monument and such, but I don't think those would survive what happened to your village in all these years." Ducking under a branch, Naruto shrugged. "Well, for one, it just doesn't feel like Konoha." Not even needing to turn to see that Pyrrha had raised a brow, the whiskered blonde continued. "Remember I said that it was the Shodaime Hokage, first/founding Fire Shadow, that built the village? Well, I wasn't joking. The Shodaime had this cool ability called Mokutan, or would release. He could pretty much grow any kind of plant on command with just his chakra." Kurama, having been around long before that time, chimed in. "Yes, if I can recall correctly, the area where Konoha came to be was originally a simple field of grass, but Hashirama used his ability to create plant life to make the area flourish, creating a forest as dense as this one in a matter of a few hours. He then went on to build much of the village itself with the same method. He alone is the reason Konoha became the village hidden in the leaves." Pyrrha was stunned beyond words. Sure, she had seen firsthand the power Naruto was capable of, but for a single man to literally create a forest and a village with his own energy was astounding and almost unbelievable. The man sounded a lot less like a shinobi and more like a wizard of some sort. It was something straight out of a fairy tale. "I remember hearing Gigi say that he was also the first Kami no Shinobi," Naruto remarked, more to himself as he recalled the talk the Sandaime had given him on Konoha's leaders. Kurama grunted. "Yes, he was. There are not many humans who have earned my respect, but he was one of the few. Having personally done battle with him, Hashirama was truly beyond what Yunin-jin are usually capable of, easily on par with some of us Biju." Again Pyrrha was shocked. While she couldn't say she knew Kurama nearly as well as Naruto did, she knew enough to know that the foxy Biju was not exactly fond of most humans, so, to hear him admit that he actually respected this man said something about this Hashirama. To have earned the respect of the most powerful of 9 monstrously powerful forces of nature was no mean feat. Well, anyways, because it was the Shodaime who pretty much created Konoha and brought life to the area, the trees and life around Konoha are different than anywhere else. In a weird way, it was almost like the village was alive. Naruto finished. Kurama again interrupted. "While that is true, you must also remember, Konoha had been beset many times and nearly destroyed since its birth. In fact, that ninjen with the sage's eyes succeeded, and left Konoha as nothing but a crater. Clenching his fist at the memory of that day, Naruto nodded. Turning his gaze to his container, the QB continued. And if my memory serves me well, you also destroyed miles of the surrounding area in your battle with him. For once, Pira was truly feeling left out of the loop, something she hadn't felt since Naruto had come clean about how he had come to Remnant and what he was. Even then, she wasn't completely in the dark, and had been one of the few to really know about his past. Now, she was rather confident that despite his talks with the raven-haired faunus of Team RWBY, she knew more about her partner than anyone else, bar Kurama. Now, however, that fact was being highlighted even more. Kurama had been with Naruto literally since birth, and from their talk, there was still more she had to learn about her blonde crush. Frowning, Naruto asked, "What's your point, Fuzzba?" "My point is, the village Hashirama built was destroyed. You ninjen rebuilt Konoha, but it was not built in the same way. That feeling of Hashirama's unique chakra is more than likely long gone. Considering that bastard Uchiha had already managed to destroy most of the village before your sensei sent us here as well, she is more than likely correct. It will no doubt be difficult, if not near impossible, to feel out Konoha by now," Kurama gravely explained. While he held no love or care for the village, the Biju understood that finding it was crucial for he and his container to move forward. Finding Konoha meant they could figure out what had happened after they had been sent into the future, and more than likely find a few noteworthy items such as the Fuin no Sho, which would be immensely helpful in helping the half-blood Uzumaki grow even stronger, something which he felt would be necessary in the near future. "Doesn't mean I'm gonna give up. I've done the impossible before, I'll just do it again," Naruto stated confidently and simply. Kurama just grinned, already having known that was exactly what his container would say. After all, that same stubborn perseverance was one of the reasons he had grown to respect the idiot blonde, and I'll be here to help any way I can, Pira added, giving her partner a warm smile. Naruto grinned. "Thanks, you're the best, Pira-chan. Unless either of you is actually going to make a move, we should actually keep looking for Konoha," Kurama interrupted, pointing out that they had stopped moving some time ago and had been standing in the same spot for a few minutes. Blushing at the implication of what the QB had said, Pira looked away. Naruto, being as dense as a rock when it came to romance, merely looked at the Biju confusedly. "Huh! Kami, you're still as dense as ever. Hey! So none of us managed to find anything of note?" Professor Panathenea asked. Taking up various spots around the clearing they had set up camp in, the group shook their heads in the negative. "Ren and I did find a really cute pet rabbit though," Nora exclaimed, holding up a deeply confused brown ball of fluff. Olive rubbed the bridge of her nose while John and Neo's sweat dropped, while Nora's teammates, already used to her antics, only gave out a few chuckles. "Can we keep him, please?" Deciding to spare Ren from being the voice of reason, as per his usual, Naruto replied, "As much as I don't mind, it might not be such a great idea, Nora." Pouting childishly, the exuberant teen questioned her captain. "Why not? I promise I'll feed him and take care of him." Scratching the back of his head, Naruto explained. "Well, it's not that. It's just I don't know how long the little guy will last around Kurama." Glancing at said Kitsune, Nora gasped when she saw the hungry look in the Biju's eyes. The toothy grin revealing his razor-sharp fangs did not help any. Seeing the fox lick its lips, the brown-furred bunny decided it would be in its best interest to get as far away as was possible, escaping Nora's clutches and bounding away back into the forest as if the devil was on its tail. "Bunny, no!" Nora cried out. Naruto merely patted her on the shoulder. "It's the circle of life, Nora. Fox has got to eat after all." As if to emphasize that point, Kurama came padding back into the clearing, a satisfied look plastered on his snout, surprising everyone as none of them had even seen him leave in the first place. "Yes, well, tomorrow we'll spend the first part of the morning searching once again. At around noon we'll be heading back into the village to gather supplies." "Understood?" Olive announced, trying to regain control of the situation. The teens all made some sign of acknowledgement, now far more interested in the campfire, seeing as how Naruto was using it cook. Seeing as how they had spent the better part of 8 hours wandering aimlessly through the forest, and only had a few snacks, the thought of an actual meal was all too enticing. After a modest, yet filling, meal of rice and deer meat, something Naruto had caught and killed during his and Pira's searching, the group of teens all took to their tents, ready to rest up. All except Naruto. While he'd be lying if he said he didn't enjoy sleep, his boundless stamina and massive chakra reserves could keep him going for 2 or 3 days without rest if need be. Knowing that, the whiskered teen was not at all worried about not sleeping, especially with something far more important requiring his attention. You can feel it too, can't you? Kurama stated rhetorically, already knowing the answer. With a thoughtful frown on his face, Naruto nodded. Yeah. There's a huge concentration of chakra somewhere nearby, but it feels different. Staring in the same direction as his container, the moonlight reflecting off of his crimson orbs, the Kyuubi answered. That's because it's been molded, changed into one of the elements. Not tearing his gaze away from the moonlit horizon, the blonde shinobi questioned the chakra monster. But I thought that could only happen with nature transformation? Kurama grunted. You are correct, so that means that either it has become a natural occurring phenomenon, leftover chakra collecting in places and being affected by the environment around it, like a coal being turned into a diamond under the right amount of pressure, or something created it, and is leaving pockets around for some reason. So that's what dust is, isn't it? Nature transformed chakra, just crystallized. That's why that fire dust Pira gave me was so easily able to blend with my raisin shuriken, huh? Naruto added, finally confirming what he and Kurama had theorized about the mysterious energy. Correct. The reason the people today are so easily able to use it is because it is them reaching back to our days, the connection of aura and the already nature-transformed chakra reconnecting and resulting in what is a rudimentary form of elemental jutsu. However, like we've said, these people themselves no longer have chakra in the same way shinobi did. So that begs the question, why is there such an abundance of leftover chakra, so much so that these nin-gen have been able to base an entire way of life on using it as an energy source? Kurama wondered aloud. Looks like we're gonna need some of Neo's help after all, Naruto stated. Kurama frowned. Yes, while I still don't think it was the smartest idea to owe someone like Cinder a favor, it's too late to go back, so we may as well make use of her. For a moment neither spoke, content to simply let their thoughts flow. While he was just as curious and worried about whatever the mass of chakra was, Naruto had to think about how much his relationship with Kurama had changed in the last year or so that they'd been in Remnant. While they could easily jump at each other's throats, and were more than happy to get a little violent with the other, underlying it all was a sense of camaraderie and respect, a stark contrast to what had once been a mutual hatred, one angry at being imprisoned against his will, again, his freedom stripped from him through circumstances far outside his control, and the other blaming the monster within for the harsh life he had been thrust into due to being forced to be a jailer long before he could even so much as sit upright. It had been a mess of pointing fingers and misplaced anger, and, amidst the chaos of life or death situations and a madman with plans for world domination, it was not the most functional or healthy of relationships. But even still, Naruto could at least say that the Biju had been the only constant in an ever-changing life, something he had come to appreciate only recently. When he had been left to starve, it was Kurama's chakra that had kept him going. When he was hurt beyond the capabilities of even his own Uzumaki healing, it was the Kitsune's chakra that had healed him. And when he was facing down opponents far more skilled and experienced than he, it was that same chakra that gave him enough power to triumph against the odds time and again. Albeit, that was all done against Kurama's better wishes, but it was still appreciated. Do you think us being sent here to Remnant was a good thing? Naruto finally asked, breaking the silence. Raising a non-existent brow at the seemingly random question, Kurama paused a moment to gather his thoughts before responding. It is hard to say. With anyone else, I would have said that your capture by that masked Uchiha would have been the end of it all, but you have the uncanny ability to turn even the most unfavorable of situations to your advantage. Letting that sink in, the chakra beast continued. However, it has so far not at all a bad thing that we are here. Thanks to this change you've managed to grow as a person and warrior far more than you ever have or possible would have during our time. Not only that, but the people you've met and bonded with share a far more intimate relationship than most any you previously had. These nin-gen trust you. They genuinely care for you. They don't fear you or me, nor do they see you as a possible flight risk. More than anything, they depend on you. They have changed you and vice versa. While the Biju and he now had a much different relationship, Naruto was still shocked to hear the blunt honesty with which the Kitsune spoke. But as much as things have changed, they've also stayed the same. For example, you're still a stubborn moron. Kurama mocked. Shaking his head, Naruto simply gazed at the moonlit forest, a deep green maze that could possibly hold the answers to the what-ifs that ate away at him. An uncharted, wild, and dangerous place, having safeguarded its secrets for possibly thousands of years. More so than anything, what struck Naruto was that it felt so much like home, and yet did not deliver that same warmth in him that Konoha did. Whatever was to come from this mission, though, would no doubt herald some interesting revelations. That much the leader of Team NetPR was sure of. As if to answer him, the forest seemed to breathe, exhaling a soft breeze that rustled the leaves, carrying with it a light whisper that beckoned him like a parent calling to a child. Something was definitely waiting to be found. Chapter 24. Rasengan! A cry of agony echoed through the forest as a Grimm fell victim to the drilling nature of the Namikaze's signature jutsu. Nearby, Pyrrha cleanly cut through the jugular of another Grimm. Likewise, Rin used the bladed portions of storm flower to dispatch of one of the creatures. Nora was just as easily able to use Manghao to crush the skull of a hapless two-legged Grimm. Neo, revealing the blade she kept hidden in her parasol, pierced through the skull of her opponent with a bland, bored look on her face. John showed his own battle prowess, using his sword to lop off the head of a Grimm. Observing the teens, Gray nodded his head in approval. They work quickly and efficiently. Good to see that Beacon is still turning out exceptional fighters and defenders. Panathenea shook her head. While that is true, this group is far above the average cut. Yes. The feats they are capable of individually are only eclipsed by what they can do as a team. Ashbin exclaimed. Olive continued. Neopolition came as a late entry to our school alongside her teammates of Team Siameni. However, she and Uzumaki get along rather well, which is possibly why she was added to our mission. Ark is a student of Atlas. Frowning, Gray asked. Atlas? I know the Vital Festival is coming, but for them to be here this early? And for one of them to be put on a mission with one of ours? Doesn't sit right with me. Olive could only offer a shrug. Mistral and Vacuo have already sent some of their students as well, however, I agree. Ashbin trusts Ironwood far too much. Raising a brow, the older huntsman asked. Wait, Ironwood? That's even more worrisome. Unfortunately, we could not oppose the order, and I have a feeling Ironwood is simply trying to figure out something the rest of us have been. Professor Panathenea replied. And what exactly has the prestigious professors of Beacon so stumped? Gray asked, crossing his arms. Ignoring the sarcastic tone, the bespectacled professor answered. Uzumaki. None of us know where he is from, where he was trained, or what his semblance is. He is powerful, far too much for someone so young. He fluently speaks a dead language from the time before recorded history. He is an unknown, and we all want answers so that we may know where his loyalties lie. Shaking his head, Gray let out a chuckle. You haven't changed a bit, Olive. Eyebrow twitching in irritation, the brunette huntress asked. And what's that supposed to mean, Gray? Turning his gaze back to the group of teens as they cleaned up the remaining few Grimm with casual ease, the veteran huntsman replied. You were always overanalyzing everything, overlooking the most obvious things that a blind man could see. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised if Ashbin hasn't already noticed and is simply letting this all play out. Out of the corner of his eyes, Gray grinned as he caught the normally composed professor slowly growing more and more irritated. It's plain as day where the kid's loyalty lies. Look at him, and I mean really look at him. Huffing, Olive complied. Looking at the whiskered teen as he interacted with the others, the brunette let out a sigh of aggravation after a few short minutes. What in the world are you getting at, you old fool? Brushing off the insult, Gray stated simply. The way he smiles and laughs, it's genuine. Look at his eyes and the way they shine. It's as clear as day that the kid truly cares for his teammates. You want to know where his loyalties lie? They lie with those 3 kids right there. It's beyond obvious that he will go above and beyond for them. It's something I saw within minutes of meeting him. It's no doubt something Ashbin sees as well. Recalling what she had seen back during their expedition to Yuzushio, Olive was hard-pressed to argue. The teen had thrown himself headfirst into danger and risked bodily harm in an effort to protect them. What's more, Pyrrha, Nora, and Ren had done the same for him. Even after being heavily wounded by the monstrous Nevermore, the 3 had still pushed themselves to save their friend and captain from what could have been a perilous fall. Then there was Team RWBY. It was clear as day to anyone who spent any sort of time with the teens that Naruto cared for them in the same way he cared for his own team, and it was reciprocated. The girls of Team RWBY cared for the whiskered blonde in just the same way. If rumor was to be believed, the blue-eyed teen was also friends with the members of Team CFVY as well. How had she so blindly ignored all of that? How had any of them? Well, that was pretty easy, Nora complained. Pyrrha replied. Well, it does seem like the people of the village tend to keep to themselves and don't go out of their way to provoke the Grimm, so it'd make sense that the Grimm return the favor possibly. Naruto hummed in thought. Pyrrha-chan is right. The Grimm really don't seem as violent towards the village. Seeing as how Grimm are constructs of nature, it only makes sense, Kurama intoned. The village and its residents don't take from nature what they don't need and seem to have reached a level of coexistence that affords them a sort of free pass towards the Grimm. Nodding his head, Naruto could see what his Biju was saying. If they were correct in believing that the Grimm had been created with the intention to purify the earth of evil, that being the humans and their destructive ways, then it only made sense that villages such as this that had reached a sort of harmony with nature would not register as a threat to most Grimm. Why Iskus Kiers? Captain Whiskers! Shaking himself from his reverie, Naruto was only slightly surprised to find Nora waving a hand in front of his face. Knowing that he tended to block out the outside world when he was conversing with Kurama, the blonde chuckled. Oops. Guess I kinda got lost in thought for a bit, sorry. Knowing the clear signs of when her friend was having a chat with his chakra beast partner, Pyrrha became curious and waited for the others to begin walking away, settling herself into a casual stride beside the whiskered captain. What were you and Kurama talking about? Seeing as how it wasn't anything that needed to be hush-hush, Naruto flung his arms behind his head and shrugged. Just talking about how you're probably right about why the Grimm aren't as violent around here. Somewhat surprised, Pyrrha asked. I was honestly just throwing it out there as a possibility. Well, it actually makes sense if what me and Kurama know about Grimm is true. Naruto casually answered. While the topic of Grimm wasn't exactly her favorite subject, it'd be a bit of an understatement if she said that she, like many others, wasn't curious to know what made the ferocious creatures tick. After all, humans and Grimm had pretty much been at war for an innumerable amount of years. Thinking about it, that brought up a good question. You never had Grimm during your time, did you? Shaking his head, Naruto frowned. No. They were, I guess, born sometime after I was sent here. Do you know what created them? Sighing, Naruto admitted. Nope. The only thing we managed to figure out is that they're actually made up of pure nature chakra. You mean the energy you used to go into your sage mode? How is that possible? Pyrrha questioned, now highly interested in the mystery of Grimm. Naruto shrugged. Not a clue. Pyrrha smiled and laughed. Leave it to her captain to somehow answer one of Remnant's greatest mysteries, but have no way to back it up. Though that wasn't very true either. Naruto could very well back it up by explaining how his own skill of using the energy of nature itself gifted him with the ability to sense it out wherever it may be. Of course, that meant coming clean about what he was, something she knew he wasn't too keen on. Oh well, Pyrrha was more than content with how things were now. The people who knew were those who could be trusted with such knowledge, small as that circle may be. It was still a group of people Pyrrha was happy to say genuinely cared for the whiskered team. To most that may seem as nothing of note, but she knew that to Naruto, it meant the world. Shaking off those more serious thoughts, the redhead turned and smiled at the curious gaze of said blonde, shaking her head to answer the unasked question. It's nothing. Grinning in return, Naruto lowered his voice so that only she could hear him. Well, we should hurry up and get back to the village. I got something to tell you guys. Now that piqued Pyrrha's curiosity. They had spent the last 4 days aimlessly wandering the forests around the village and had as of yet to discover anything of interest outside of a few wandering Grimm. If Naruto had found something, this could be the turning point in actually getting them somewhere. But the question remained, why did he want to wait to tell them? So what's up, Captain Whiskers, and how come it's just us? Nora asked curiously. And rightly so. Naruto had made it a point to get the members of Team NNPR alone, leaving the others of the mission group to their own devices. It was something the other 3 members of the team were curious to know. Kurama was the one to answer, speaking aloud since he didn't need to pretend to be a simple fox around them. A few nights ago, myself and the Gaki here discovered something. We had felt it almost since arriving here, but it was hard to figure out what it was without getting closer. After venturing out into the forests, we were able to get a better idea and now know for sure that what we were sensing was a large concentration of chakra. Ren, being the astute one he was, asked. But there's something different about it, isn't there? Naruto nodded. Yeah, see, when I perform any elemental jutsu, I have to go through 2 steps to get the proper effect. The first step is nature transformation, where I actually mold my chakra and change it into the element I want. After that is shape transformation, where I actually change that chakra's form and movement. Pira's analytical mind was quick to put the pieces together. So when you perform your fire dragon jutsu, nature transformation turns your chakra into fire, while shape transformation actually turns it into a dragon and makes it move. Kurama smirked at seeing the intelligence of the teen. That's it exactly. Far better explained than what the baka could say. Ignoring her pouting captain, Nora surprised the others by asking a rare poignant question. Wait, so can you use all the elements? Naruto smiled at the normally hyperactive hammer wielder. Kind of. From how it was explained to me, any shinobi could learn a jutsu from any of the elements with enough time and practice. But each person is aligned with a certain element, or elements. Because of that affinity, it's easier to learn jutsu from that element, but harder to learn jutsu from an opposing element. You're aligned with fire, water, and wind. And deduced quickly. You are both right and wrong. Kurama answered for his Jinchuriki. Seeing the raised eyebrows, one coming from his own container, the Biju sighed before explaining. The Gaki is naturally aligned with both water and wind, traits passed to him from his mother and father respectively. Despite Kushina's lack of skill in ninjutsu, she was still aligned with the element of the Uzumaki. The fire element is something he gained from being my Jinchuriki and my inclination to the element. However, as an Uzumaki and sage, he has another affinity, one a little more obscure. Gaki, what do you remember about yin and yang? Scratching his head and recalling the brief lesson he had with Yamato-sensei, Naruto answered. They're the two aspects of chakra, right? Yin has to do with spirit, while yang is the body, I think. Kurama rolled his eyes at the overly simplistic answer, but continued. Sort of. Yin is the aspect of spirit and governs over imagination, while yang is the aspect of matter, governing over vitality and physical energy. Now think, as a half-blood Uzumaki, what traits do you have that not even other shinobi had? Assuming his thinking pose, Naruto counted off. I heal faster, have more stamina, and I'm pretty good with seals. Ren and Pira were quick to see what the Kyuubi was pointing out, the latter blurting out. Naruto has an affinity for yang. Of course, this caused Nora to begin giggling for seemingly no reason. Noticing that the others were looking at her questioningly, the orange-haired teen explained. Naruto has an affinity for yang? You know, blonde hair, big boobs? Yang and yang? Naruto's sweat dropped, Ren sighed, and Pira gave a light chuckle. Ignoring the girl, Kurama continued. Yes. Well, we've gotten rather sidetracked. Naruto's affinities aside, what we found odd about the gathering of chakra was that it wasn't pure. Through some set of circumstances it's been changed into the first step of becoming an elemental jutsu. So there's pretty much a gathering of raw elemental energy somewhere nearby that we have to investigate, without the others of our group finding out. Ren filled in. Nodding along, Pira added. The professors will be easy. They trust us and will leave us alone like they have the last few times we went and explored. It's John who will give us trouble. Any time we split up to explore, he was always near myself and Naruto. Nora wiggled her brows suggestively. Maybe he has a crush on our resident redhead, eh? Sweat dropping, Pira shook her head. As much as that is flattering, I'm not interested. Right, after all, you already have a hunky blonde someone. The hammer wielder giggled, coughing in an attempt to hide her blush. Pira suddenly found looking at Naruto to be a little harder. Said Jinchuriki scratched his head in confusion. Eh? Sighing at his captain's obliviousness, Ren clamped a hand over Nora's mouth. Don't say it. He'll figure it out himself, one day. Sometimes I doubt that. Nora pouted. Really, it was becoming increasingly frustrating to watch the two do their little dance, Pira being too shy to broach the topic while Naruto was simply too dense to take notice of how obvious it was that the invincible girl liked him. That wasn't even taking into account the fact that Team RWBY's Faunus harbored romantic feelings of her own for the blonde Jinchuriki, and was similarly afraid to outright say it. And call her crazy, but lately it seemed to Nora that Yang was becoming more and more touchy-feely, in a much more intimate way than was her usual. Something needed to be done. So Neo will keep John off my back long enough for us to regroup and investigate whatever that chakra source is, got it? Naruto finished. Blinking, Nora realized too late she had blanked out and become too engrossed in her thoughts, missing whatever it was her teammates had been discussing. Sheepishly chuckling, she asked. One more time, please? Shaking his head, Ren sighed. Just follow my lead tomorrow, okay? Giving an enthusiastic salute, the orange-haired teen exclaimed. You got it, Ren! Team NPR rose that morning with a plan in mind, and curiosity nagging at them. After informing Neo of what her part would be, as well as a promise of cake when they got back to Beacon, the group set out into the forests once more. Following the same plan they had before, the professors allowed the group to splinter, wanting to cover as much ground as possible, oblivious to the machinations of the teens. A quick thumbs up to his diminutive accomplice, and Naruto was wandering off with Pyrrha. Ren and Nora headed off in another direction, confusing the latter as she had assumed they were supposed to be investigating the chakra mass together. However, after a quick gesture from her longtime friend, the hammer wielder followed. Neo smirked as she glanced at an unsuspecting John from her peripheral vision, her eyes changing into a vivid emerald green. She was going to have fun with this one. Run! What's going on? I thought we were supposed to be looking into that chakra thingy? Nora questioned. We are, but we had to make the professors and John think we were just wandering off aimlessly. By now, Neo should have had enough time to distract John and lead him away from Naruto and Pyrrha, so we're going to backtrack and meet up with them now, Ren explained. Before the orange-haired teen could say much more, the two were caught off guard when their captain suddenly appeared in a poof of smoke. Boss had me transform into a bird and trail you guys. There's also another clone with Neo in case something happens and John figures it out. I'll be helping you guys meet up with Boss, the clone elaborated. Nodding his head, Ren followed the doppelganger, though a question began to form in his mind as he went over what the shadow clone had said. You clones can change shape? Yup. It's one of the jutsu the boss has perfected, like Kawarimi and Kagebunshin. It was actually one of the basic 3 jutsu that were taught at the academy, the clone Naruto answered. Elsewhere, the real Naruto was having a very similar conversation with Pyrrha. Well, the actual jutsu itself is really just a low-level illusion. Only thing is, because none of the academy's teachers were willing to help me, I botched it up when I was learning it and somehow ended up making it an actual transformation. So you can actually transform yourself into other people and things? Pyrrha asked, stunned. Really, one couldn't blame the redhead. The ability to change your form at will had to defy several laws of nature and physics, right? Then again, she could control the polarity of objects, so maybe she wasn't one to talk. To further make his point, Naruto made a single hand seal before he was obscured by a cloud of white smoke. When the cloud cleared, Pyrrha was wide-eyed as she laid eyes on an exact clone of Professor Ashbin, cane and all. When the Ashbin spoke, the redhead was even more shocked to hear the same slightly raspy voice of the headmaster come out. Yep. As long as I have a good enough vision of who I want to be, I can copy pretty much everything about them. Another poof of smoke, and instead of the silver-haired headmaster, there was now a perfect copy of Weiss. Unable to resist herself, Pyrrha poked the imposter in the rib, eliciting a high-pitched cry of surprise. That's amazing! Drawing out the signature rapier of the Schnee heiress, Pyrrha watched in awe as Naruto/Weiss went through the motions of using the weapon, the barrel where dust was stored spinning, but not lighting up due to the lack of actual dust. But since I can't copy Princess Semblance or her style of fighting, I can't really use her weapon right. The jutsu is really meant more for espionage and stuff, the Weiss copy stated. In a third cloud of smoke, the whiskered blonde captain of Team NPR was back. Pyrrha shook her head. I'm glad for that, otherwise it'd be incredibly unfair if you could copy all of our techniques and fighting styles. Continuing their walk, Naruto scoffed. TCH, tell that to Sasuke and his family of copycats. Raising a brow, Pyrrha had to ask. What do you mean? Naruto had of course mentioned the name of his former teammates, and even told her a little about all of them, so she knew the name. He often spoke with a fondness when he mentioned the only female of the team, Sakura. He had even admitted that once upon a time, he had chased her because he thought he was in love with her. Thankfully, he told her that he later realized that although he did love the pink-haired girl, it was more in the manner that a brother loves a sister. Then there was Kakashi, or Kaka-sensei as Naruto called him, whom she found out was the one to have sent the Jinchuriki hurtling through time as their home village was beset. Again, it was with a tone of love that the blonde often spoke of the silver-haired teacher. From what she could piece together, as much as the man had been his sensei, the two had also had a sort of familial bond. Lastly was Sasuke. The apparently broody Uchiha of Team 7 was something of a sore subject for Naruto. He had told her that once upon a time, they had insulted and fought each other in a way that almost made it seem like they were the worst of enemies. As they were forced to spend more time together as a team, they grew a sort of respect and camaraderie for the other. Eventually, they were close enough to be considered brothers, having shared similar backgrounds and aspirations. That changed horribly and violently when Sasuke left Konoha in order to get training from another of Konoha's rogue nin. Pira had seen the scar, and even to this day, it was as clear as day that Sasuke had been aiming to kill Naruto. Even after witnessing the power of his regenerative abilities firsthand, the redhead had no idea how a younger Naruto had survived being run through by a fist covered in lightning, not once, but twice. In Pira's mind, Sasuke was the scum of the earth. Betraying your home village for greedy ambitions was one thing, but to also attempt to murder someone you considered a brother for those same reasons was vile and sickening. However, it seemed that in the time that Naruto had been in Remnant, he had begun to come to terms with a lot of things, Sasuke's defection being among them. It was still far from being the Whisker Teen's favorite subject, but seeing as there had been no closure or any sort of redemption, no one could blame him. Well, remember I told you he came from this super prestigious clan? Well, the big reason his clan was a big deal was because they had this Kekkai Genkai, or bloodline limit called the Sharingan. It was this thing that let them copy any nin, gen, or taijutsu style they saw. They could then turn around and use whatever they copied as their own. It also let them cast illusions on you if you looked them in the eye. Stupid thing, even let them see chakra and predict what you were going to do next. While Pira was amused by the childish anger her partner had in regards to his teammate's ability, it was more concerning that this Sharingan pretty much allowed the Uchiha to steal the hard work of others with no drawback. As if that wasn't enough, it also gave them a plethora of other abilities. That was almost as unfair as Naruto's own abilities. I see what you mean. For someone to essentially steal another's hard work like that isn't right and sounds wrong, though I don't think you're one to talk about unfair abilities. Pira teased. Naruto scratched his head. Whatcha mean? You have near unlimited stamina, a variety of large-scale and destructive elemental techniques, an almost literal force of nature partnered with you, can add to your own powers by taking in the power of nature, and can heal from even cellular damage. You have a rather unfair advantage over most any huntsman. Ren answered, he and Nora having finally caught up to their teammates. Huh, well, when you put it like that, Naruto sheepishly replied. So, how far are we from that chakra mass? Ren inquired, changing the subject. Getting serious, Naruto frowned thoughtfully. Not too far off now. At this rate, we should get there in another couple minutes. Do you know where it is exactly? Pira asked, cracking open his eyes. Kurama answered. Underground. We're not sure if there is a nearby cave of some sort, but it's a possibility that we'll need to do some digging to get to it. Oh. Can we build some dirt castles while we're at it? Nora asked, speaking up for the first time. I don't think we'll need to. Ren answered simply. The group of 4 teens gazed at the mouth of a gaping cave opening, hewn straight into the ground at a harsh slant. The entrance was surrounded by an overgrowth of hanging vines and fallen tree stumps, a deep inky blackness keeping them from being able to see what exactly lay inside. Really, it was less of a cave opening and more of a chasm given that it leads straight underground. Hey, Pira, remind you of anything? Naruto joked. Recalling their encounter with a certain Deathstalker Grimm several months ago, Pira sighed. Hopefully this doesn't end up like that. Examining the area, Ren interjected. We may have some trouble actually getting in. It's too dark to even guess how far down this leads, and none of these plants are anywhere near strong enough to hold our weight. Raising a brow, Naruto simply began to walk forward. Reaching the chasm entrance, he continued forward, heedless of the no doubt hundreds of feet drop. Seeing their captain casually walk off the ledge, the others raced to the chasm's edge. Peering over the gaping hole, Ren sighed. Right, you can walk on walls. Grinning cheekily from his position on the side of the sheer rock face, Naruto said nothing. A few minutes later, the members of Team NetPR were slowly making their way down through the dank chasm, Nora and Rin carried by a Kage Bunshin, while Pira was left in the care of the original blonde. While the other 3 could barely see their own hands in front of their faces, Naruto and Kurama could see quite easily, the former thanks to liberal use of chakra being sent into his eyes, and the latter using his fox-like form to his advantage. We're about to level out, but it looks like this place is gonna be a little troublesome to get around in, Naruto announced. Shaking his head, Ren sighed. It's a maze down here, isn't it? Come on, run! You should know that nothing is ever easy with Captain Whiskers. Nora chuckled. Finally reaching a point where they could stand on their own, Team NNPR gazed out at the numerous paths before them, helpfully illuminated thanks to Kurama igniting his tail with a small fire. Going with the obvious, Naruto summoned up a clone for each of the routes available to them and sent them onward. However, minutes after, Naruto winced as he received an influx of memories from said clones being forcibly dispelled. Concerned, Pira asked, "What happened? What's wrong?" Shaking his head, the blonde teen answered, "I'm fine, but we have a bit of a problem. The whole place is rigged with traps." "Like with giant boulders?" Nora asked, half joking and half serious. Choosing to not acknowledge the random comment, Ren frowned thoughtfully. "Traps? That must mean that someone else was here and doesn't want whatever is here to be found." Kurama finished gravely, staring at where he could sense the chakra mass. For a moment, the group of teens mulled the thought over, going over the ramifications of what the Biju's statement meant. Could this be linked to them finding Konoha? Could the location or a hint of the village be hidden here? Or was it something else entirely? Why would someone go through the trouble of doing all of this? What could possibly lay so deep underground, guarded by lethal traps? Or was this simply all done to guard a mass of energy? Panting and dripping with sweat, John strafed to the right, dodging a strike from the clawed paws of a beowulf. Bringing up his sword, the Elysian easily cut a bloody path through the beast's jugular. Standing up straight and wiping the sweat from his brow, the blonde teen observed his handiwork. A handful of beowulf and creep-grim corpses littering the small clearing. Turning to his temporary partner, John was glad to see the diminutive teen was equally capable of handling her own enemies. "I wonder why there seems to be so many Grimm today. This is more than we've seen the whole time we've been here," John stated. Neo in return shrugged. Sighing, John mentally lamented his misfortune of being paired with the nonverbal parasol wielder. "Well, guess we should keep moving, right?" Neo simply nodded. Scratching his head, the blonde attempted to reorient himself and figure out which way Naruto and Pira had headed, wanting to follow Ironwood's direction and keep an eye on his fellow blonde. He was relieved when he briefly caught sight of a familiar shade of red peeking through the foliage. Moving to follow the lead, John remained completely ignorant to the malicious smile on the face of his ice cream-themed partner. With the teen far enough out of earshot, the grim corpses, shattered like a pane of glass breaking into thousands of shards, falling away to reveal a pristine clearing, free of any grim or signs that a skirmish had even taken place. Keeping that same smirk, Neo followed the Elysian, her eyes flashing briefly to a familiar shade of green before returning to a combination of pale pink and light brown. Oh yes, she was more than happy to have been sent on this mission, the promise of cake from a certain whiskered teen making it all the more worthwhile. Then again, getting to mess with this buffoon was reward enough. "You know, I still feel like it's pretty irresponsible of you to just let your students wander uncharted forests while you sit back and relax here with us," Gray stated with a raised brow. Sitting across from him, one leg crossed over the other and a book in hand, Professor Panathenia allowed her gaze to flicker towards the older huntsman before returning to her book. "And like I've said before, they're fine. If anything, not having us around will do them more good than if we were with them. Maybe I was wrong, maybe you have changed after all." The veteran huntsman shook his head. The bespectacled professor ignored the backhanded comment, flipping another page in her book. After all, he hadn't seen the power wielded by the whiskered leader of Team NPR. Not only that, but the blonde seemed to have the devil's luck when it came to situations like this. Better to let it play out as it would instead of foolishly trying to get in the way. Now I'm starting to see how Ashbin sees things. That's probably not a good thing actually. Chapter 25. "Why don't you just keeping spamming clones, Captain Whiskers? They'll find the right path eventually, right?" Nora asked, attempting to be helpful. Rin was the one to answer. "With as many options as there are, it would take far too long to figure out which is the right way to go, and we have no idea how much longer Neo will be able to fool John." As if on cue, Naruto winced, receiving the memories of a clone. "Not much longer. He's already extremely suspicious and definitely knows something's going on." Pira stepped forward. "Then we'll just have to pick a path, follow it, and hope for the best." At that, everyone turned their attention to Naruto. When he realized that all eyes were on him, Naruto chuckled unsurely. Yeah? You are our captain. There's no one better suited to choose which tunnel we follow," Pira urged, an encouraging smile on her face. "That and you also have the most luck out of us," Ren added. Taking a moment, Naruto attempted to gather his thoughts. There had to be some way to narrow down the choices without wasting a huge amount of time. While he was pretty good at sensing his surroundings, he was nowhere close to as good as an actual sensor type. But I can get pretty darn close, the blonde thought with a grin. Inhaling, the whiskered teen closed his eyes and gathered himself, finding that inner peace many spent years searching for. Reaching out the proverbial hand, the former shinobi turned huntsman in training beckoned for nature, asking for its help. Nature answered the call, filling its avatar with its strength and wisdom. Opening his eyes, the curious gazes of his teammates met the blonde's now honey-brown eyes. The three teens were of course curious to know why their captain had taken on his sage mode, something they thought was better suited for the battlefield after having seen how immensely powerful he was when aided by nature itself. For now, though, Naruto put his heightened senses to use, spreading out his awareness in an encompassing blanket. He could feel the movements of the small critters that dwelled in the caves as they scurried about, becoming even more aware of the large gathering of elemental chakra that lay further in the cavern. Focusing on that, the blonde sage attempted to glean any clues he could from it and its surroundings, hoping it would reveal some clue to figuring out how to get to it. Snapping open his eyes, Naruto grinned. "This way!" Without another word, the four teens and Biju were off in a dead sprint, their feet pounding against the stone floor as they made their way through a near pitch black and winding tunnel. While Naruto was now even more capable of getting around in the darkness, Kurama, sat on his container's shoulder, acted as a guiding light for the other three members of Team NPR as they followed their captain's lead. Much to everyone's relief, whatever their captain had done apparently helped him choose the right path as, a few minutes into their sprint, they had yet to bump into any traps. Keeping a near breakneck pace, Naruto was really pushing the limits of his team's stamina and speed. They all knew he was a stamina beast and could definitely outspeed any one of them, but the pace he had set and was continuing to go at was grueling. Even Pira, who trained with the former shinobi on a somewhat regular basis, was starting to feel the burn in her legs and lungs. Really, it was only thanks to liberal use of their aura that Pira, Nora, and Rin were able to trail behind Naruto. Thankfully for them, the light of Kurama's fire was quickly becoming outshone by a much brighter source ahead, signaling the end of the tunnel. With anticipation and excitement rushing through them, Team NPR burst into the light, eager to see the reason for someone going through all of the trouble to this all up. "I wonder how Naruto and his team are doing," RWBY pondered to herself aloud as she meticulously went through the process of cleaning and caring for Crescent Rose. With a weapon as massive and intricate as the high-caliber sniper scythe, regular maintenance was a must. By now that idiot's probably managed to get him and his teammates wrapped up in some convoluted situation or something. Weiss replied flippantly, more occupied by cataloging her dust so that it was all organized alphabetically. Shaking her head, Blake simply continued to sharpen the many blades of Gamble's shroud with the whetstone. Considering that every mission they've gone on has ended up in some larger and much more dangerous mishap, Weiss is probably right. Grinning, Yang added, "Man, you guys make it sound like a bad thing. I can't wait till we get to start doing our own missions. Imagine all the adventures we'll have and the places we'll see. It'll be great." Rolling her eyes, Blake replied. "Says the girl whose idea of fun is ending up in a massive brawl in an underground club." Ignoring the attempted insult, the busted blonde nodded her head. "Yeah, fun. Sometimes I wonder how you two are even related," Weiss remarked, bringing up the more noticeable differences between Yang and RWBY. "Well, that's easy. I'm the awesome and hot older sister, and RWBY is the cute and adorable younger sister." "Duh," Yang answered as if it was most obvious thing in the world. "Hey, I'm awesome too. Don't forget who's team captain, right, Weiss?" RWBY indignantly cried. The Schnee heiress looked over her shoulder with a cold look. "No. Ah man," the younger teen sulked. Deciding to change the subject, Yang suddenly said, "So, anyone want to take bets on how banged up Foxy is when he gets back?" "Yang! How appalling that you would suggest such a thing. We're talking about the well-being of a fellow student of Beacon here, no matter how strong he may be." Weiss spoke up, noticing that her teammates were all giving her strange looks. The white-haired teen sighed before pulling out her wallet. "Give me 10 lean on a broken limb." The raven-haired fauness of the team shook her head. "Naruto heals extremely fast. 10 lean on near-death situation but totally fine. No fair. That's like a guarantee with Naruto." The bond between the members of Team RWBY and NNPR was one to truly be admired. "What is going on here? I feel like I've been running in endless circles. And what's with all these grim? There is no way this many of these monsters have been around these forests without us already bumping into them," an extremely frustrated John mentally complained. Eyes flickering to and fro, the blonde attempted to spot even the smallest of hints that could possibly lead him to figuring out what was going on. However, some small part of him kept telling him to keep his eyes on his temporary mission partner. For some reason, his gut was telling him that the diminutive girl had something to do with what was going on. Neo, while aware of the Elysian's growing suspicion, was still having a grand old time, happily pushing her semblance to higher and higher levels in a bid to keep John ensnared in her web of illusions. She would have to thank Naruto for giving her the opportunity to have this much fun when she got the chance. Whoa! Nora breathed out, stunned beyond measure. Her teammates were just as awed by the sight before them, even Naruto finding himself at a loss for words. Illuminating the underground cavern and covering everything from the floor to the ceiling were pulsing crystals of varying sizes, each burning with a different color of the rainbow in a variety of different hues. Filled with the energy of the elements, the crystalline formations seemed to hum and vibrate, filling the enclosed space with a sense of warmth and life that Naruto could only liken to how it felt to use Sage Mode. In fact, still being in his Sennin Modo, the spiky-haired blonde was made even more aware of just how alive the stone room felt. And there was really no other way he could describe the sensation of being there, the cavern feeling well and truly alive with the energy of nature and all its various elemental forms being present. "This is amazing," a breathless Pyrrha finally whispered, somehow afraid that by speaking, her words would in some way damage the tranquility and awe-inspiring beauty of the place. Still speechless, a stunned Naruto took a step forward, and what happened next surprised even Kurama. As the blonde moved to step further into the cavern, the crystals seemed to pulse erratically, almost as if they were waking up from their slumber. While he was just as struck by the sheer beauty of what lay before them, Kurama couldn't help but to feel as if there was something else here, something more to this cave than just crystallized chakra, something familiar. As he racked his brain for what could possibly be bugging his instincts, the Biju too late realized that in their stupor, Naruto had stepped onto what looked like a sealing matrix of some sort, inadvertently activating it. "You moron! What did you do?" the QB barked. Cursing, Naruto attempted to jump away, only to realize that part of the seal's duty was to apparently keep whoever activated it pinned to the spot. The two were even more surprised to find that, although Kurama wasn't physically connected to the seal himself, he was just as unable to move from his spot around his container's neck. "Naruto!" Pyrrha cried out, rushing out to her friend. However, a second mechanism of the seal came to life, forming a luminescent yet faint yellow barrier, barring the rest of Team NPR from entering the cavern. Beginning to panic, the redhead pulled out her shield and attempted to ram her way through the barrier. As she clashed with the glowing wall, the seal lashed out, sending her tumbling backwards with a cry of shock. Stepping up to the plate, Nora took on an unusually serious face as she held up Magnhild. Glowing a light pink, the orange-haired teen poured as much strength as she could into her strike. An explosion of pink and yellow blinded an onlooking Rin and Pyrrha, the barrier taking the full might of the teen's hit. As the sudden flash cleared away, it seemed as if Nora would push through and break the barrier through her sheer strength alone, the yellow wall of energy bending and giving way under the force being exerted. In a surprise turn of events, the barrier seemed to gain even more strength, suddenly pushing back against Nora with even more force. Unprepared for the sudden retaliation, Nora was sent slamming into a nearby stone wall with an audible crack. Seeing this, Rin knew his own chances of success were non-existent. Nora was far stronger than he would ever be, and if she couldn't even so much as scratch the barrier, then it was pointless for him to try. Clenching his fists, the long-haired male frowned as he could do nothing but hope his captain was doing what he could to get out of there. While his teammates struggled with the barrier, Naruto was trying to figure out just what the seal was meant to do. Aside from pinning him to the ground and blocking the entrances to the cavern, the seal wasn't doing much else, it seemed. What then was the point? Why would someone take the time to set this all up? Moreover, who could have possibly made a seal this intricate and well-crafted? While the use of Fuinjutsu was hardly rare, the amount of people who could claim to be well-versed practitioners during his time was all but a small handful, himself included, and this was clearly made after he had been thrown into the future. "So you've finally made your way here, child of Azura." At hearing the voice, one he hadn't heard since he had been born, Kurama's head snapped up, crimson eyes wide in astonishment. "How? Tu-sama?" Staring into a familiar yet entirely different set of the legendary Rinnegan, Samsara Eye, the half-blood Uzumaki felt himself suddenly overcome with a sense of awe and reverence. This was the man who had literally begun the age of shinobi, the man who had gifted others with the teachings of Ninshu, the precursor to ninjutsu. Standing before him was the man responsible for stopping the RWBY, a beast so powerful it may well have been a primordial god, a man who had then gone on to seal that same monster into himself, becoming the first Jinchuriki. But his feats didn't stop there. No, there was a very good reason this man had all but ascended into godhood, becoming a legend thought to be nothing but a myth. Standing before Naruto, casually floating above the ground in a lotus position, was the legendary Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the Rikudo Sannin, sage of 6 paths, the original Kami no Shinobi, and father to the fearsome 9-tailed beasts. Garbed in a pristine all-white kimono with a high collar, the signature Magatama arranged around said collar, a pair of horns emerging from the start of his hairline, keeping the shaggy mess of pale red hair out of his rinnegan, and a long goatee of the same hair color trailing down, stopping at his waist, the sage cut an imposing yet regal figure. Despite his being slightly shorter than Naruto's impressive 6 feet, the progenitor of the shinobi sect seemed far more impressive than the blonde, his presence alone feeling like a physical weight. The gaze of the light purple and concentric ringed eyes of the rinnegan did nothing to calm Naruto's nerves either. Having faced down a countless number of frighteningly powerful beings before, Naruto had thought himself capable of standing tall before anything and anyone he crossed paths with. How wrong he was, but why had the sage called him a child of Azura? Child of Azura? What are you talking about? Simple. You, Naruto Uzumaki, are a descendant of my youngest son, Azura, just as all Senju and Uzumaki are, Hagoromo explained calmly. Having been told he was the son of the Yondaime Hokage, a hero of his home village, Naruto had thought he'd never be surprised about his heritage. He was apparently dead wrong. What? Not at all perturbed by the teen's outburst, the sage answered. It is true. What's more, like some of your ancestors before you, you have become host to my son's chakra and will, his latest transmigrant. Had it not been for the seal keeping him glued to the floor, Naruto would have fallen on his ass in surprise. Son to a Kage and Jinchuriki to the strongest of the Biju? Sure, fine, he could deal with it. But host to the chakra and descendant of one of the Rikudo Sennin's sons? That was a whole hell of a lot to take in. So that's why the Gaki reminded me so much of that one. Kurama mused aloud, taking the news a lot better than his container. Nodding, Hagoromo continued. Indeed. However, there are more pressing things that need to be discussed. Gathering himself, or attempting to at least, Naruto asked. Like what? Turning his full gaze to his descendant, the sage began. While I, like you, loathe the idea of destiny, certain events should have transpired during your time. How they would have ended depended entirely on you and your actions in response to those events. However, something disturbed the cycle. Obito Uchiha should have never led a full assault on Konoha like he did. The ensuing turn of events leading to you being thrust this far into the future began a cascading series of events that drastically changed everything. In all of the possible outcomes, none of them lead to you being here. None of them lead to the monstrosities known as the creatures of Grimm. None of them had you here, in this world now known as Remnant. Scoffing, Kurama groused. There's a very good reason why the Gaki earned the title of most surprising ninja. A faint grin crossed the wrinkled and aged visage of the first Jinchuriki. Yes, that has been proven time and again. Although you remind me very much of my youngest, you are indeed a unique existence, Uzumaki Naruto. Allowing the grin to fade, becoming serious once more, the Rinnegan user continued. As I was saying, you should have never ended up here. But that is not the case. You are here, and already you have greatly changed this time just as you had your own. While Naruto had done a lot of maturing this past year, he was still rather impatient. While I get what you're saying, what does it matter? You even said so yourself, it shouldn't have happened, but it did. What's the point of this? Why call me down here? When you were expelled from your time, everything fell apart. You were meant to be a hugely important player, the child of prophecy. You were to either lead the world to a time of great peace, something even I had failed at, or lead it to its ultimate ruin. Without you there, the world collapsed. The sage gravely explained. Seeing the horrified look on his descendant's face, Hagoromo continued. As you have no doubt already discovered, the shinobi era is now but a forgotten time, an age whispered to have been the worst and bloodiest time of mankind. Clenching his fists, Naruto questioned his ancestor. But why? What happened after I left? What happened that led to all of this? Why can people no longer use chakra? Why do the Grimm exist? With you gone, taking the last and most important piece of his plan, Obito flew into a rage. He foolishly revived Madara Uchiha, the instigator and cause for much grief and death that stretched to even your generation. Just as angry that his life plan had failed due to your disappearance, Madara attempted to recreate the RWBY without Kurama. That plan failed, horrendously. Without the largest piece of it, the RWBY was nothing but a mindless beast of destruction, wielding the power of 8 of the Biju. In its blind rage, it killed Madara, Obito, and brought death to almost the entirety of the shinobi world. In a last-ditch effort to stop it, I tried to help the descendant of my eldest son, Indra, your friend Sasuke. But even that failed, the worst of my fears coming to realization. The Rikudo sighed. Holding in the storm of questions that whirled around inside his head, Naruto listened attentively. What else could he do? What he was being told had already happened, there was nothing he could do to change that. But still, as much as it pained him, he needed to know. What do you know of the RWBY? The sage suddenly asked. Scratching his head, Naruto shrugged. Just what Kurama's told me, that it was a product of the Shinju coming to take back its chakra. You and your brother fought it, defeated it, and sealed its body into a rock prison, throwing it into space, creating the moon. Then you sealed its soul and chakra in you, making you the first Jinchuriki. Knowing that when you died it'd be released, you split it into 9 different beings you created, turning them into the Biju. That is, mostly correct. Seeing the questioning gaze of the blonde, the sage explained. The RWBY was not the Shinju, at least not entirely. The RWBY was the byproduct of the Shinju merging with my mother, Kagaya, the original wielder of chakra. Listening, wide-eyed and beyond astounded, Naruto could not believe the true story behind the birth of chakra. How the sage's mother, Kagaya, had been a princess who ate a fruit from the god tree, using the powers it gifted her with to stop the endless wars that engulfed mankind at the time. Then came his and his brother, Hamura's, birth, the birth of the first natural-born chakra users. However, arguments about the path to true peace began to tear the Otsutsuki family apart. Kagaya, who had used an iron fist to quell the wars of that time, believed that force and power was the true path to eternal peace. Hamura and Hagoromo argued that love and understanding would lead to a true sense of peace. Angry that her sons went against her wishes and began to give out the power of chakra with the intent to prove their point, the mother of chakra merged with the Shinju and became the RWBY, hell-bent on reclaiming the chakra from her sons as well as the people they had given it to. Thus began the battle between mother and children. Okay, so your mom was actually the RWBY and crazy powerful. What's that have to do with anything? You and your brother defeated her? Naruto asked, becoming impatient once more. Hagoromo was still not at all bothered by the whiskered teen's impatience. Without our knowing, my mother created a being known as Zetsu before she was sealed, a creature whose sole purpose was to revive her through any means. Zetsu, without anyone knowing, began to pull the strings. He was the one who instigated the fighting between my sons, leading to decades of needless death, hate, and wars. He fooled Madara into believing the Eye of the Moon plan would lead to peace. He started each of the great shinobi wars. He fooled everyone and was the one ultimately responsible for the fall of your time. Despite my best efforts, he succeeded and my mother was revived, at least partially. Understanding now where it was going, Naruto spoke up. Without Kurama, someone who held a huge portion of her power, she wasn't at complete strength, was she? The sage nodded. Yes. However, she was still plenty powerful, more than strong enough to begin taking back the chakra I had given out. It was at this point that Naruto found himself confused. Then what happened? If your mother was so powerful and managed to go through with her plan, why are we here? Shouldn't the world still be ruled by her or something? Like I said, in a last-ditch effort, I attempted to help Sasuke in defeating her. While he managed to do some damage, alone, he was no match for my mother, despite my gifts to him. However, he did manage to fracture her and, with my help, seal her away. But their battle took its toll and he passed. His last act was creating this seal, both of us knowing that, somehow, you would manage to find your way here. Even I should have passed on, but thanks to the seal, I've kept this fragment around so that I could warn you. Hagoromo intoned. Warn me? Warn me about what? Naruto urged, now worried. My mother was sealed once before, split in two. Thanks to that monstrosity that is her physical will, she managed to bring herself back. I have no doubt that she is capable of doing it again. I also do not doubt that the current state of the world is in no small part due to her machinations. Being tied to this seal, I have been unable to see what is truly going on. using small bursts of my chakra and powers to glean what information I could. I do not know the exact cause for the creation of these creatures of Grimm, nor do I know the exact reason for the birth of this aura, or such, but I have no doubt in my mind that my mother is at the heart of it. Taking a breath, the sage let his feet touch the ground, coming to stand just before Naruto and gazing directly into the teen's ocean blue eyes. Be wary, Uzumaki Naruto. You are truly now the last shinobi and the only one capable of stopping my mother and righting the wrongs myself and your ancestors created. Already you've begun walking the path to do just that. I believe in you, just as so many others have and still do. As I am sadly unable to gift you your birthright as a child of my blood, but I will say this: the bond between you and Kurama has yielded amazing things. However, there is still more you two are capable of. Just as I told my son so long ago, you are right, the path to true peace is one of love and understanding. Do not be afraid to stand in the face of adversity for it. Taking a deep breath, one much needed, Naruto bowed to his forefather. Arigato. I will not fail you, I swear it. Allowing a fond smile to cross his wizened face, the sage turned his gaze to Kurama. He will need your help. Scoffing, the Biju mocked. What's new? Nodding, Hagoromo placed a firm hand on Naruto's shoulder. Now I think I've kept you long enough, your friends seem to be very worried. I'll leave you with this though, Konoha still holds to its name. Before Naruto could ask more, just now realizing that he was no longer in that cave filled with chakra crystals, a blinding light engulfed him, the last thing he saw being the fading visage of a smiling sage. The next thing the whiskered teen knew, he was waking up with a gasp. Blinking away the after effects of whatever had hit him, Naruto was surprised to find himself on the floor, his head resting on Pira's lap as a clearly concerned redhead combed her finger through his hair, gazing at him with worry-filled emeralds. Seeing a pair of familiar blues staring back at her, Pira inhaled. Naruto. You're all right. Turning, Naruto saw Nora and Rin rushing to his side as well, equal parts curious and concerned. Captain Whiskers. What happened there? Nora questioned. Shaking off the cobwebs, Naruto slowly rose to his feet, aided by a helping hand from Pira. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Frowning at the casual way he brushed off whatever had happened, Pira inquired. Are you sure you're all right? After that barrier eventually fell, we rushed in to find you and Kurama just passed out on the floor. You've been out for a while actually. And why wouldn't we? What could have happened that tops you being a child soldier from thousands of years ago? Ren inquired with a raised brow. The blonde captain chuckled. Well, let me start with it actually being the first Jinchuriki who called me here, a man thought to have been a myth by even my people. Nudging her childhood friend in the ribs, Nora teased. Come on, you should know better by now than to question Captain Whiskers. Sighing, Rin acknowledged the truth in the hammer wielder's words. I really should by now. Although beyond curious to know what had happened, Pira was more relieved than anything else. We can talk about this later. Right now we should probably head back, before John figures out what's going on. Nodding his head, Naruto agreed. Yeah, Pira's right. Besides, I could use some fresh air and sunlight right about now. Putting a finger to her chin, Nora wondered aloud. Does anyone know how we get out of here? Slowly, all heads turned to their whiskered captain whose own eyes widened. Shit! Later that night, a blank-faced blonde found himself laid out atop the roof of the building the mission group were staying in, staring at the endless blanket of the night sky, the light of the stars and fractured moon illuminating the otherwise dark night. Kurama? Feeling the sleeping Biju grunt in acknowledgement, Naruto continued. Has the moon always been broken like that? With a start, the Biju leapt to its feet, staring into the sky with wide eyes as it gazed at the clearly fragmented satellite. How had we never noticed? You don't think it has anything to do with Kagaya, do you? The moon was created by the sage as a prison for her. Of course it being shattered like that has something to do with her. Kurama barked. The pair were interrupted by the appearance of a certain redhead joining them. How are you holding up? Chuckling, Naruto shrugged. Bah, it's nothing new for me. Laughing quietly at her partner's usual joke cockiness, Pira sat herself at his side. Are you ready for tomorrow? As ready as I can be. Finding Konoha is still gonna be pretty tough, even with the old sage's hint. Naruto huffed. Nothing is ever that easy with you, Naruto, we all know this by now. Pira giggled. Laying back with his hands folded behind his head, the Jinchuriki sighed. Yeah, you're right. Have ever though got about what would have happened if you weren't sent here? Pira suddenly asked. Naruto took a moment to think before answering. When I first realized that this was the future, yeah. It was almost all I thought about. But like I told the old sage, what's done is done. I can't waste my time thinking about all the what-ifs. Brooding was always Sasuke's thing anyways. Grinning, the blue-eyed teen turned his attention from the night sky to the red-haired beauty. Besides, if it hadn't happened, I would have never met you, Team RWBY, or anyone really. I would have never gotten the chance to be on a team with you, Nora and Ren. I probably would have still had a cruddy relationship with Fuzzbutt here. Like I said when I told you guys the truth, I'm happy here with all of you. In turn, Pira smiled warmly. I'm glad to hear that. What about you? Well, have you ever thought about what it'd be like if I wasn't here? Naruto asked, turning the question back to the emerald-eyed teen. For a moment, Pira seemed to struggle with the answer. I don't think I could. You're my first true friend, the first person who made me feel like, well, me. I don't ever have to feel like I have to pretend to be someone I'm not around you. I really can't think of my life without you in it, Naruto. Surprised by the genuine honesty in Pira's words, Naruto was, not for the first time, made aware of how much of an impact he had on the lives of the people around him. Sure, he had always been told he had the uncanny ability to bring out the best in others and even make friends out of enemies, or make people believe in him, but it was only here in Remnant that it was actually being shown to his face. Sure, Konoha had prospered in its relationships with other villages and countries like Yuki/Haru no Kuni, Land of Snow/Spring, Takigakure, village hidden by a waterfall, Hashigakure, village hidden among the stars, Nami no Kuni, Land of Waves, Oni no Kuni, Land of Demons, and countless other territories due in no small part to Naruto and his actions. But seeing as how he was never directly involved in the day-to-day politics of those dealings, he was never able to see for himself just how much he had impacted those places and its people. For goodness sake, it wasn't until after his trip with Jiraiya that he had learned that Nami had named the massive bridge that connected it to the mainland after him. He had a freaking bridge named after him, and he didn't find out until years later. Really, no one could blame Naruto for being surprised. Although the celebration he had received after defeating Pain/Nagato had been eye-opening and beyond joyous, what made him happy was knowing that even here in the far future, with a more mature mindset and in different situation altogether, he was still able to really leave a mark on the people around him. It also meant that striving for the peace and ideals so many had entrusted to him wasn't such a far-fetched dream, even if it meant starting out small again. Chapter 26. You know, seeing as how this is a forest and all, I don't get how your ancestor thought his hint was helpful, Ren remarked tiredly. And rightly so. The now joined-up team and NPR had spent the better part of their morning scouring the wilds in search of Konoha with no more success than they had in previous days. Luckily for them, they were able to wander around in relative peace thanks to the others of their group being otherwise occupied. John had been tasked with helping some of the local farmers with their crops and such while the professors were attempting to narrow the search area by investigating local rumors and such. Meanwhile, Neo had been put on guard duty with Arya, something that was clearly not as enjoyable for the shorter of the two as it was for the elder huntress. Well, it kind of is. The forests around Konoha were a lot more dense than this, and we had plenty of waterfalls and stuff around, Naruto explained, though a hint of frustration was beginning to creep into his voice. Pira frowned worriedly, deciding to voice her own concerns. But Naruto, that was during your time. A lot has happened between then and now, there's no way the terrain could be the same as it was. Sighing, Naruto agreed. I know, but there has to be a reason the old sage said that. He wouldn't just throw it out there for no reason. Placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder, Pira offered what comfort she could. And you're right about that. From what you said, he doesn't seem like the type of person to just casually throw something like that out there for no reason. We'll figure it out together. Smiling warmly at the redhead, Naruto nodded. Yeah, you're right, Pira-chan. What if the hint means that the trees are supposed to tell us where to go? Nora suddenly asked out of the blue. Naruto seemed ready to turn down the idea, when suddenly, something hit him. Kurama? Old man sage knew I could use senjutsu, right? The Biju frowned in thought. More than likely, he was a sage himself, and I have no doubt that even his echo, with as limited of an awareness as it had, would still be more than capable of sensing such a thing. Plus, you are of his blood, it'd be expected of you. Frowning in thought, Naruto decided to follow his hunch. Placing a hand on a nearby tree, the blonde Uzumaki closed his eyes and became eerily still. At first, Nora, Ren, and Pira were content and curious enough to simply watch and wonder what their captain was doing. However, when his breathing seemed to all but come to a stop, coming in nearly imperceptible shifts, they began to grow slightly worried. They'd seen Naruto meditate before. He did it often enough to properly control the apparently massive reserves of chakra he had, but they had never seen him so at peace and so still. If he wasn't still standing, they might have begun to worry that he'd died. Suddenly, without any sort of warning, Naruto was gone in a blur of motion, almost literally disappearing in the blink of an eye. Caught completely off guard by the burst of speed, the rest of Team NNPR could only stand and stare in shock. Knew he would do something dumb like this. Kurama groused. Stretching, the Kyuubi turned his crimson gaze to the teens and nodded his head in the direction Naruto had gone in. Try and keep up. Shaking off their stupor, the teens broke into a dead sprint, trailing behind the speedy little Biju in disguise. For a few grueling minutes, the three teens were yet again forced to test the limits of their speed and stamina. Kurama, despite his small size, easily keeping ahead of them with zero effort despite their best efforts to catch up. Trees, boulders, small bodies of water, and even Grim were sped past as the group of four traversed the wilds of uncharted land, following after the trail of their blonde captain. With Naruto being their main concern, the three were oblivious to how much ground they were covering and how far into the forests they were heading. Thankfully for them, they eventually spotted the bright sunny blonde locks of their captain, said blonde seated atop what looked to be some sort of stone surface. Pushing that thought to the back of their mind, Nora, Ren, and Pira rushed to join Naruto. None of them were prepared for what lay before them. As the three set foot on the same stone surface that Naruto was seated on, they found themselves at a loss for words. Stretching far out below them were the dilapidated buildings, vine-covered monuments, and remains of what could only be the home of their friend, Kanahigaku no Sato, the famed village hidden in the leaves. As devastated as Uzushio was, it had been preserved thanks to its isolated location as well as the numerous barriers and such that kept it safe. Konoha was not so lucky. The shifting of the land as well as the grips of time and age had devastated the once great shinobi village. Where once stood homes and shops were now great trees of a verdant green. Towering warehouses and such were split and twined by the very earth itself. At the heart of the village a once great tower stood, now covered in sprouting trees and vines, chunks of the structure missing, exposing its insides to the elements. Even with nature having moved to bring Konoha back into its fold, it was painful to see that not all of the damage done to the village had been wrought by the hand of time and the elements. Millennia had passed and even then, it was easy to see that a great battle had scarred not just the village, but the very earth itself. Patches of land where not a single piece of greenery grew, where only barren earth and rubble lay. Something, or more accurately, someone had brought true devastation down upon Konoha and her people. It was an odd mixture of beauty and horror, a vestige of the past, no doubt capable of revealing a great many secrets, or yielding years of historical knowledge and such, and yet it was also a grave reminder of just what that time in human history had been like. Uzushio had been destroyed long before Naruto was even born, making it that much harder to grasp the pain and strife that were the end result of its siege. Konoha, however, was ground zero for what was almost the apocalypse, the great blank spot in Remnant's history books, the near end of humanity, and the very real end of the shinobi, a people who had been gifted with a power that allowed them to defy the very laws of nature and do the impossible. Most importantly, though, Konoha was Naruto's home. He had been born in this very village. He had made friendships, and even deeper bonds of love within the walls of this place. The teachings of Konoha and its Hokage had been so ingrained in him that they had become his personal creed and moral compass. So it was with understanding that Pira watched her captain, her partner, her friend, silently shed tears of untold grief. There was no word she could possibly say that would or could possibly make him feel better. So, she settled for the next best thing. Without a word, the redhead got to her knees behind the grief-stricken blonde, draped her arms around his neck, and rested her chin on his shoulder. Naruto made no move to argue with the gesture, instead allowing the tears to come even more freely. Knowing just how much this hurt his container, Kurama just as silently offered his own solace, seating himself on Naruto's lap and curling into a ball. Nora and Rin tried to do what they could as well, each taking up either side of their friend and captain, hoping their silent way of conveying their support for him came across as strongly as they wanted it to. Minutes passed, none of the five making so much as a sound or a move, their eyes surveying the remains of one of the 5 great shinobi villages. As the sun reached the apex of its journey across the sky, the group and the village were bathed in its bright rays. While Team NPR didn't exactly take notice of the sun's position, they were able to see what the effects of it were. All at once, the shell of a village and the forest seemed to come to life, a cooling breeze rushing through the area, gently ruffling the greenery and stirring a wave of emotions within Naruto. Drying his eyes, the shinobi turned huntsman smiled ruefully. This was my favorite spot in the entire village. I used to spend hours just sitting here, thinking about whatever was on my mind or just watching the sunset. Sometimes I'd feel like the past Hokage were here too, helping me out in their own way. Remembering when Naruto had told her about his favorite spot, Pira suddenly realized just what they were on top of. This is the Hokage monument. This is the thing you painted graffiti on. Nora questioned, now understanding just why Naruto had been particularly proud of that escapade. They were seated on what appeared to be a literal mountain. Chuckling, Naruto nodded his head. Yeah, this is it. Turning somewhat somber, he rose to his feet slowly and walked to the edge, using chakra to stick to the surface. It was with a genuine frown that he saw that the once proud and strong visages of the Leaf's past leaders had suffered just as their village had, hardly even resembling what they once were. Well, at least it used to be, Naruto added, touching the spot where he knew his father's likeness had been. He had spent literal hours atop this mountain, so of course he knew it pretty well. Even now, in its fallen state, he could still see the ghostly image of what it once was as clear as day. It really drove home just how much damage had been done to the village. Even when pain had attacked and literally erased the village, the Hokage rock had stood, a show of the village's unyielding fire. Not even Kurama had managed to damage the mountain in his brief rampage. And now it lay in shambles, mirroring the state of his home. Walking back to stand with his team, Naruto sighed. I'll send a clone back to the village and have it lead the others here. It'll take them a while to get here, so in the meantime I want to see if something's made it. Anything in particular we should keep an eye out for? Ren asked, knowing that this entire place held a very special place in his friend's heart and memories. Not really. Other than a few sentimental things, the only thing I want to keep away from anyone is the Fuin no show. I doubt anyone could do anything with the jutsu in it, but I'd rather not take the chance, Naruto answered. The knowledge of jutsu like the hack no Fuin Shiki, 8 trigram sealing style, Kage Bunshin, and the countless others in it is not something that this day and age need knowledge of. Kurama agreed. While the demise of the shinobi era was a hard pill to swallow, there was some good to have come from it. Namely the lost such things as the Sharingan and the Dojutsu's curse of hatred, the everyday bloodshed between shinobi over petty matters, the need for Jinchuriki, and especially that foul Kuchios, Edo Tensei, summoning, impure world resurrection. A technique that defiled the souls of the deceased by forcibly bringing them back to the living world through the sacrifice of another living human was vile, and should have never been made in Kurama's opinion. Thankfully its only known users, Tobirama Senju the Nidaime Hokage, second Hokage, and the jutsu's creator and that foul snake, Orochimaru, were long dead, leaving the scroll of seals as the only way to access any kind of knowledge about the jutsu. If the scroll had made it through the ages, then it would be best for the entire world if it was kept under lock and key by his Jinchuriki, hopefully to never see the light of day again. That said, there might still be some useful techniques kept in the Fuin no show that would be useful to add to Naruto's arsenal. Wordlessly and without need for the hand seal, Naruto created a shadow clone. Already knowing its orders, the clone sped off back in the direction of the village. With that done, Team NPR began their descent down the mountainside, using the various outcroppings as footholds. Well, Nora, Pira, and Ren did. Naruto used chakra to casually walk down the monument. Regrouping at the foot of the monument, the group set out, Naruto leading the way. Even with the village now in shambles, the blonde was still able to easily navigate the broken streets with practiced ease, having spent near his entire life exploring every nook and cranny of his home out of both necessity and boredom. Arriving at what had once been the main marketplace, Naruto made a beeline for a very specific shop. Blue Orb sadly looked upon the broken building that had once been among his most visited spots in the village, a place where a certain father and daughter had offered him free food and shelter an innumerable amount of times. Aside from the elderly Sandaime, the two had been among the very few whom he knew had been in his corner from day one. While most of the eateries around the village had shown him disdain for what he was, the father and daughter duo had been the only ones to welcome him into their restaurant with a smile and a warmth he had been unfamiliar with at that time. Tucci and Ayam Ichiraka had welcomed him not only into their ramen stand, but their family as well. Ayam had been the sweet, caring elder sister figure in his life, always pushing him to better himself and never shying away from displays of affection. Tucci was one of his earliest male role models, offering advice where he could and never afraid to stand up for Naruto when he had to. Many a shinobi and villager alike had been threatened with the ramen chef's impressive set of knives when they made the dumb decision and bad-mouthed the blonde anywhere in the vicinity of his ramen stand. Stepping over the fallen rubble, Naruto trailed his hand along the broken and rusted counter, a wave of memories washing over him. Arigato Tuchiajizen, I am Nichin, for all that you did for me. No place could ever make ramen like you guys did. I'll miss you, Naruto murmured to himself, a single tear sliding down his cheek. Despite the quiet way it was said, the others still managed to make it out perfectly clear. Pira mentally resolved to ask about it later, holding her tongue for now as she realized that Naruto was saying his goodbyes, something he had never been able to do till now. Wiping away the tear, Naruto continued on, heading straight for the Hokage Tower. Arriving at the base of the tower, the blonde led the group up the winding staircase, or what remained of it. Rotted wood, a result of being exposed to the elements, had caused the stairwell to collapse in on itself in most places. Even some of the still standing sections were in much the same state, falling away under the slightest movement. Still, the group managed to make their way to their goal, the Hokage's office. Stepping over the fallen doors, the teens were greeted by the branches of a tree that had sprouted several floors below. What was left of the office were scattered books and scrolls, most in very poor condition. No doubt they would fade to dust if touched. Something, however, caught Nora's eye. Stepping over some rubble, the orange-haired hammer wielder picked up the interesting item, blowing layers of dust off of it. What's this? Seeing what Nora held in her hands, Naruto smiled sadly, gently taking the torn and heavily damaged accessory. This was the Hokage's hat. Tsunade-bachan never really liked wearing it or the robes, but it was pretty much all Gigi wore. I always told him and Tsunade-bachan that one day I'd be the one wearing it instead of them. Struck by a sudden realization, Naruto began to laugh, throwing the others off. Are you okay, Naruto? Pira asked unsurely, realizing that he was probably freaking his teammates out. The whiskered teen explained. I just realized I never made it past Genin. Seeing the confused looks, Kurama explained. In the shinobi system, there were 3 main ranks. Genin was the lowest rank. What? The rest of Team NNPR collectively shouted. No one could blame them for their surprise either. They had seen firsthand just how powerful Naruto was and had heard the stories of the amazingly strong opponents he had defeated. While they knew he obviously hadn't achieved his dream of leading his village, they figured he had at least been pretty high up in the ranks. But to be the lowest rank possible? That just didn't add up. Understanding why they were shocked, Naruto shrugged. Well, the first time I took the Chunin exams, I wasn't exactly the smartest or anything. Plus, I left pretty quickly after the whole invasion thing to find Tsunade-bachan so she could become the Godame. Then I left on a 3-year training trip with Ero-Senin to train and explore the world. Because we were always on the move, I missed the following Chunin exams. When I got back, Akatsuki became more active. Then I left again to get my sage training. Pretty much, there was just so much going on, it kind of slipped everyone's mind that I was the only one from my graduating class that was still a genin. Pira shook her head with a quiet laugh, Ren simply sighed, and Nora cracked a grin as she giggled. At this point in their friendship with the temporarily displaced shinobi, none of them could find it in themselves to do much else, having learned to accept the fact that the whiskered teen was one surprise after another. So if it were here, where would the scroll be? Ren asked, deciding it was best to move on to their goal. Scratching his chin, Naruto thought aloud. Well, after I stole it, Gigi thought it'd be best he kept it in here with him, and knowing Tsunade-bachan Hold on, you stole the scroll? Ren asked, halfway between incredulity and exasperation. Realizing that he had never told his team just how he had become a genin, Naruto chuckled uneasily. Never told you guys that story, huh? Chuckling, Pira shook her head. No, but you may as well now. Well, I actually failed my genin exam, a 3rd time. My sensei at the time, some team who hated me for being Kurama's Jinchuriki, tricked me into thinking that if I stole the scroll and learned a jutsu from it, I'd be able to graduate anyways. Dumb me listened to him, and well, I did it. Naruto explained. Deciding to ask about the whole failing for a 3rd time thing at a later time, Pira inquired. Wait, if he used you to steal it, wouldn't he have tried to take it from you or something? Sighing, the blonde nodded. He was going to kill me and then leave the village with the scroll. Before the others could voice their opinions on his traitorous sensei, Naruto continued. But lucky for me, my other sensei, Iruka, got to me first. Long story short, Iruka defended me, and when Mizuki threatened to kill him, I jumped in and used the jutsu I had learned from the scroll to kick his ass. Iruka-sensei and Sarutobi Gigi decided that my helping to stop the attempted theft of one of the village's most treasured items, as well as helping to apprehend the traitor, was reason enough to make me a genin. Furrowing his brow in thought, Ren asked. Wait, isn't the scroll supposed to contain a bunch of dangerous and forbidden jutsu? What jutsu did you learn from it? Grinning cheekily, Naruto answered. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. What? The three exclaimed in shock. Having used and abused the technique since literally day one of his shinobi career, Naruto shrugged. Well, yeah. The reason the clones are solid and can move and act on their own is because I'm actually dividing up my chakra to create them. Plus, when they pop, I get any information they learned. If you make too many, you could accidentally use up all your chakra and die. Or if you dispel too many at once, the huge rush of info could turn your brain to mush. And you use it so carelessly? Pira cried in worry. While Naruto had previously explained the benefits of the jutsu, she had thought there had to be some sort of catch to it, otherwise it would far too broken of a technique. Now, finding out just what those repercussions and dangers were, the redhead was extremely worried about the fine line the blonde seemed to be dancing when he used the jutsu. Realizing how bad he had made his signature jutsu sound, Naruto quickly explained. But I don't have to worry about any of that. Seeing the incredulous stares, the Jinchuriki explained. Since I'm part Uzumaki, I inherited my clan's naturally potent chakra. Plus I constantly have Kurama's chakra being filtered into me. Even as a kid, I had way more chakra than most adults. I've made hundreds of clones before and felt barely a drop in my chakra. As for the danger of information overload, Brett also has me to thank for that. If he passes a certain threshold, I can and have helped to organize the information and block out anything unnecessary. Kurama groused. After a moment of silence, Ren sighed. I can see why people called you the most surprising shinobi. Naruto could only grin cheekily. Shaking her head in exasperation, Pira decided to refocus on their task. After you stole it, do you know where the scroll was moved to? Naruto scratched at his chin in thought. Well, like I was saying, I doubt Tsunade-bachan would have bothered to move it since I was the only person who ever really tried to take it. And knowing Gigi, there's only one place where he would hide stuff he didn't want me to find. Moving over to the right side of the room, the blonde moved away the remains of a couch. Knocking on the floor in a few spots, the whiskered teen grinned as he pulled up a loose floorboard. However, instead of there being some hidden space, there was just the support materials that crossed under each floor of the building. Still grinning, Naruto flipped the board over to reveal what the group had come to recognize as a ceiling array. I'm afraid to ask how you knew about that. Ren sighed. I spent a lot of time snooping in this office. It's how I knew Tsunade-bachan would stash her alcohol in a seal underneath the top right drawer of her desk and that Gigi would hide his copies of Ika Ika in a seal on the left drawer. What's Ika Ika? Nora asked, just as confused as the others. Remembering he had only told Blake about Jiraiya's novels, Naruto nervously began to chuckle. I'll tell you guys some other time. Peering at the seal, the half-blood Uzumaki began to decode the intricate array. He doubted the Sandaime would seal away the village's prized scroll with a seal that could be unlocked by simply funneling chakra through it. But he also wouldn't have used a blood seal, as that would mean only members of the Sarutobi clan would be able to unlock it, barring any future Hokage from getting to it should the need arise. Frowning in thought, Naruto began to remember why the old Kage had been hailed as the professor. The student of both the Shodaime and Nidaime Hokage, titans in their own right, Hiruzen Sarutobi was a force to be reckoned with, both on and off the battlefield. He had been the one to lead Konoha through not one, but two of the three great shinobi wars as its Hokage. Heck, it had been during the First Shinobi World War that he had been made Sandaime by the Nidaime. After the untimely death of his father as the Yandaime, the reason Hiruzen had been able to reclaim his seat as Hokage was because there was no one in the village aside from Jiraiya capable of filling that role. Even in his old age, the Sandaime was still far stronger than most any shinobi in Konoha, a vast library of jutsu at his hands and the wisdom and knowledge to put those techniques to devastating use. Despite not being as versed in the arts of fuinjutsu as his student, Jiraiya, or having the proclivity to them like an Uzumaki, Hiruzen had managed to make an elegant and airtight sealing array. The seal not only had a specific key needed to unlock it, but it also had a fail-safe designed into it. If anyone tried to overload it by flooding it with chakra, the seal would disintegrate, taking its contents with it. Luckily for Naruto, he was the son of not one, but two renowned masters of the sealing arts, and had also studied under yet another master. Pushing chakra into his fingertip, the blonde teen traced a specific pattern into the seal, one he was all too familiar with, and in a poof of smoke, a scroll that came up to his chest popped into existence. Staring fondly at the massive scroll, Naruto chuckled. I remember when this was almost as big as me. Snickering, Nora taunted. Geez whiskers, you were a shrimp? Naruto huffed indignantly. Hey! I just hadn't hit my growth spurts yet, alright. No, you were a midget, because your diet consisted almost entirely of ramen. Kurama snarked. Whatever! Let's just get this scroll sealed up before the others show up. The blonde pouted. The others simply chuckled at the childish reaction their captain had to his previous stature. Still, it was a little hard to believe considering he now easily matched Pira's impressive 6-foot height. Those growth spurts really had hit pretty hard. Is there anything else you wanted to do before the rest of our group got here? Pira asked, slightly excited to explore the village. Despite its less than stellar condition, it was still the place her closest friend had been born and raised in. She couldn't wait to hear the no doubt countless stories Naruto had to share. The Jinchuriki hummed in thought. There's a few places I'd like to see one more time, but nothing that we have to be cautious about. Besides, Professor Oblek would probably appreciate me explaining some of it to him. Raising a brow, Ren asked. You're not worried about John or Professor Panathenea getting suspicious and asking questions? Naruto shook his head. Nah, I already got a believable enough backstory for why I would know about Konoha. Parents' diary? Ren asked, recalling the lie the blonde had used to fool the suspicious language and strategy professor before. Worked before, it'll probably work again. Naruto shrugged. Nodding, Team NNPR began to make their way out of the tower, cautiously retracing their steps to avoid falling the rest of the way down. This is astounding! An entire village left over from before recorded history. Their exiting the tower was apparently perfectly timed as the team of 4 was met by the astounded faces of the rest of their group. Oblek, who had been the one to shout, was racing around the village, frantically typing away at the digital scroll in his hands and taking several snapshots as well. I have to agree with Professor Oblek, this is a monumental historical find. We already knew about Uzushio and were simply working on decoding its secrets. But this is a completely new and never-before-touched territory. I wonder what this village was called? Panathenea wondered, her inner history buff itching to be released. Kanahigaku no Sato. Naruto answered. The village hidden in the leaves, fitting. If this was truly one of the long-lost shinobi villages, they would have no doubt relied on the thick forestry as a natural defense. The brunette professor agreed. Turning her focus to the teen who had answered her question, the bespectacled woman asked, May I ask how you know this was Konoha? Naruto shrugged. My mom's family was from Uzushio. My fathers were all native to Konoha. Olive frowned in thought. Then it is safe to say that you can easily trace your heritage back to the people of this time, the shinobi. Naruto simply nodded. Why then have none of your family ever come forth with this knowledge? It would have no doubt made them extremely wealthy and well known, as well as helping the historic community learn more about the time before Huntsman and Grimm. Olive questioned. We all thought it was just a bunch of fairy tales and myths. None of us could have guessed it was real. Heck, I never thought I'd get to step foot on Uzushio, let alone find out that Konoha is real as well. Naruto argued back. Olive seemed ready to continue her interrogation, but after a moment dropped it altogether and accepted the answer. If those stories are true after all, you no doubt have some very intimate knowledge about this place and its history, correct? Oblek asked, suddenly invading the whiskered blonde's personal space bubble. Caught off guard, Naruto nervously backed up and answered. Yeah, I do. This tower here was home to the village's leader, the Hokage. The blonde former shinobi went on to explain some of Konoha's most prominent features, such as Hokage Rock, the academy, the clan district, as well as the various compounds in it, and even the market district. Oblek and Olive were all too happy to jot down the given information, as well as taking any sample they could get their hands on. Neo, while somewhat intrigued by the relic of a village, was more apathetic. Cinder would more than likely want to know as much as she could about this village as well, but her boss would no doubt have some way to get that information out of Naruto herself. John was actually stunned by Konoha and all its wonder, but was just as interested in the info his fellow blonde seemed to have on the apparent home of his ancestors, mentally filing away what he could to report to Ironwood when he got back. Having learned what they could, and with the sun still high in the sky, the group splintered apart to do their own exploration with a promise to meet back at the tower at sunset. Taking the chance given to them, Team NPR followed after their captain, who had one last spot he wanted to visit, a place Naruto's Jounin-sensei, Kakashi, had spent a lot of time at, the Memorial Stone. Naruto was surprised to find it still standing, somewhat. A large chunk of the kunai-shaped structure was missing, but considering the literal war that was being waged during Naruto's forced departure, it was shocking to see it still standing at all. Tracing his fingers across the numerous names carved into the black stone memorial, the Konoha native had to use all of his willpower to not let even more tears spill. The number of names had increased since the last time he had seen it. What made it even harder on him was that he recognized some of the names that had been added. "This is a memorial, isn't it?" Pira asked softly. Naruto nodded, unable to form the proper words. Gathering himself as best he could, the blonde rose to his feet. "We should get going now if we want to get back to the village before dark." Silently nodding, the solemn team followed after their friend, finding no words to say yet again. "Today was a monumental day for the historical community, and it is only the tip of the iceberg," Olive informed, speaking to the teens gathered before her. "Yes. We were but a recon team. Our success here is simply the beginning, as more excursions to Konoha and its surroundings will no doubt follow in the coming months as we discover more and more of our bloody past," Oblek added. "I'm surprised you lot managed to find anything out there in the first place," Gray interjected. "I just hope we don't become some sort of tourist attraction," Marcus groused. Arya was having none of it. "Oh, come on, Mr. Grumpy Pants. Even you have to admit this is pretty cool, a whole village from the time before even Grimm." While the others had their moment of celebration, Team NPR couldn't find it in themselves to join them. Without a word to anyone, Naruto suddenly up and left, Pira quickly following after him. "Want to talk about it?" Pira asked, joining Naruto on a tree branch high enough up in the canopy to get a great view of the surrounding forests illuminated by the moon. I don't know if I can," Naruto admitted. "It's a lot to take in, I know," Pira consoled. After a few moments of silence, the red-headed beauty spoke up. "Do you remember initiation?" Raising a brow, Naruto answered. "Well, yeah, it hasn't been that long." Smiling, Pira nodded as she gazed out at the moonlit forest. "I know. Do you remember when I asked about your home?" Still slightly ashamed for having partially lied to the person who was now one of his closest friends, the blonde Jinchuriki nodded. "Yeah, I told you that Konoha had been overrun by Grimm." "You did," Pira agreed, still smiling. Turning her gaze to her confused friend, the young teen continued. "And do you remember what I told you after?" Realizing what she was getting at, Naruto genuinely smiled. "Yeah, you said you'd be there for me whenever I needed you." Laying her head on her not-so-secret crush's shoulder, Pira closed her eyes and hummed in agreement. "And I always will be. But I'm not the only one. Ren, Nora, Ruby, Yang, Blake, and even Weiss care about you. We all do. And just like you go out of your way to help us, we're going to try our best to help you." Again, Naruto was reminded of how different the relationships he had now were from the ones he had during his younger years. The friendship and sense of closeness he shared with his team and Team RWBY were the sort of things he had yearned for as a lonely child and even as a teenager. While he had a special sort of bond with Sasuke and Sakura, they had never been so ready to openly admit just how close they were. It was a sort of unspoken thing. His friendship with the rest of his graduating class was even less intimate than that. Here, though, no one, aside from Weiss, really had any issue with showing or even telling him just how much they cared for him. It was a pretty stark contrast, but one that he wasn't really complaining about. "Thanks, Pira-chan," Naruto softly responded, feeling for once like he had found where he truly belonged, and he'd be damned before he let anything threaten that. "You think Beacon is still standing?" "I hope so." Chapter 27. Ruby awoke, with a yawn, stretching her limbs and shaking off the vestiges of a good night's sleep. Blearily blinking her silver orbs, the young teen happily realized that it was a Saturday, meaning that she didn't have any classes to attend. Even better, she had already finished any homework that needed to be done. Perfect. More sleep for me, the captain of Team RWBY mentally cheered. Turning over and snuggling back into her blankets, Ruby was more than ready to fall back into the realm of Morphus. The world would not give her that pleasure, though. "Ruby! Wakey, wakey!" a boisterous voice called out. Recognizing the voice, Ruby groaned. "Young! I was just about to go back to sleep." Mischievously grinning, the older sibling quickly yanked away her younger sister's blanket, exposing the pajama-clad teen to the chill of the early morning. "But guess who's on his way back?" Grumpily rising from her comfortable bed and slipping off of it to the floor, Ruby scratched at her messy head of red and black hair. "Who?" "Naruto is on his way back," another voice softly intoned. Blake, dressed in her usual clothing, turned her gaze from her young captain to the busted blonde of the team. "But he won't be here for another hour or so, which is why I told John to let you sleep." Crossing her arms underneath her bust, the lilac-eyed teen shrugged. "I told you, Blake, it's fine. We used to do this all the time back home." Ruby sighed. "She's right. Thankfully this time she didn't use a bucket of ice water, though. I for one think it's a good thing Yang woke you up," Weiss interjected from her spot on her bed. "See? Someone gets it." Yang grinned. Ignoring her partner, Blake gave the Schnee heiress a deadpan stare. "You just want to see what condition Naruto is in so you can find out if you won our bet." Huffing, the white-haired heiress attempted to cover herself. What? "No. I'm just concerned for the well-being of a fellow student is all, right?" Ruby nodded, clearly not at all buying into Weiss' poorly attempted lie. In fact, Yang and Blake were mirroring their younger captain's actions, just as easily able to see through the Schnee heiress ploy. "So, that blonde idiot is coming back today?" Emerald groused. The mint-haired teen just couldn't fathom why Cinder was so wrapped up in her attempts to recruit a certain whiskered blonde. To her, he was just like the rest of the kids that attended Beacon, blind to the harsh realities of the world, too naive for his own good, and far too annoying for what Cinder was attempting. It was baffling, really. Mercury merely shrugged. Apparently. Seeing the irritated frown on his partner's face, the silver-haired teen grinned. Are you jealous Cinder's been paying more attention to him? Feeling left out?" Snarling, the mocha-skinned teen lashed out with a swing, Mercury just dodging out of the way. "Oh, would you shut your stupid trap? You're starting to irritate the crap out of me already." Still smirking, Mercury chuckled. Someone's got anger issues. Before the two could further their spat, they were interrupted by the sudden appearance of their boss. "Enough. We have the things we need to take care of before Naruto arrives." Frowning, Emerald asked, "What do you mean? We're not throwing some party for him, are we?" Cinder raised a brow at the hostile tone, but decided to ignore it. "No. But I would like to have certain items ready for our chat later, items I'll need you two to retrieve for me." "Whatever you need," Emerald quickly replied. Mercury went with a simple nod. Cinder smirked. "Don't disappoint me." On a bullhead flying through the clear skies, Naruto suddenly felt a shiver run through his body, seemingly for no reason. Feeling the slight twitch from her position, her head comfortably laid on Naruto's shoulder, Pira turned a curious set of emeralds to her friend. "Something wrong?" Scratching his cheek as he stared into space, Naruto admitted. "No, but for some reason I feel like I'm not going to get any sort of rest when we get back to Beacon." Across from the pair, Nora was happily snoring away on an unfazed Rin who quirked a brow. "I feel like that shouldn't be anything unusual for you." Naruto sighed sadly. "Yeah, I know. I should probably just be used to it by now." On the other side of Pira, John decided to throw in his 2 cents. "I've only known you guys for a couple of weeks and it definitely seems like you guys are usually getting into some pretty crazy stuff. Says the guy who was practically hounded by Grimm the whole time we were on our mission." Naruto shot back childishly. Giggling softly, Pira lightly slapped Naruto on the arm. "Hey, be nice, it's not like he could help it." "Yeah. There was something seriously weird going on there," John said, attempting to defend himself. Both Neo and Naruto shared a quick look, both having to resist the urge to laugh or smirk. While it was somewhat cruel to have messed with the blonde at leisure the way they had, either felt any sort of remorse. Nobody had been hurt at all, and it had kept the snooping teen off his case, so Naruto wasn't at all sorry, seeing it as a good use of a prank. Neo had simply enjoyed messing with the guy, no two ways about it. "By the way, I've been meaning to ask," John continued. Seeing he had the attention of the conscious members of Team NPR, The blonde gestured at Naruto and Pira. Are you two a couple or something? It took a moment for everyone to register the question, but when it finally clicked, Pira was quick to sit up straight with a blush staining her cheek. What? No! Not at all! Naruto was meanwhile blushing up his own storm. Ren, however, cracked a grin. Call him biased, but he sincerely wished to see his two teammates end up together. Despite his usually indifferent attitude to such things, just like everyone else, he could clearly see the strong bond between the two. These days it was rather rare to see one without the other. Don't get him wrong, he thought Blake was a wonderful girl and Yan was unique and great in her own way, but he personally agreed with Nora. Naruto and Pira seemed to just click in all the right ways. The two were immensely strong, beyond that of most of their peers, standing head and shoulders above the crowd. They were also extremely selfless, placing the happiness of their loved ones and friends above even their own. In addition, the redhead and blonde teens seemed to have the uncanny ability to bring out the best in those around them, even willing to nurture those qualities. That wasn't to say that they didn't have their differences. Pira was the near definition of patience, Naruto was not. The Jinchuriki was also loud and outgoing. The invincible girl, while not at all shy, much more preferred her quiet time away from the eyes of the public. Strong, charismatic, and always willing to help those in need, Naruto and Pira were so alike, and yet drastically different as well, and that was exactly why Ren hoped to see the two together, as a couple. Individually they were great, but together, they would be even better. Oh, you're not? It just seemed like it, with how close you guys are. John shrugged. Far too embarrassed now, the two seemed reluctant to meet the other's gaze. Luckily for them, the voice of their pilot came from the cockpit. All right, guys. We're all of a few minutes out from Beacon. Thanks for flying Air Nate, have a safe trip home. Chuckling at the man's sense of humor, the group got ready to depart, most of them eager to return to Beacon Academy and all its comforts. Oh, feels good to be home, Naruto cheered. As the rest of the group stepped off the grounded bullhead, Naruto was suddenly tackled to the ground by a yellow blur. Welcome back, Foxy. Damn it, Yang. Let me go. Don't you want to play? I'll show you playing. The others could only sweat drop as the two blondes rolled around on the ground, attempting to subdue the other in a grapple. Are they always like this? John's sweat dropped. Ruby shrugged. It's how they show affection. That's healthy? John replied, unsure of his own answer. Deciding to ignore the blonde pair, Ruby turned and smiled at the rest of Team NNPR. So, how'd the mission go? Take down some super strong Grim? Find some buried treasure? Pira chuckled at the exuberant teen. Not too many Grim this time. John grumbled to himself. I'd disagree. But we did find a lost village and got some other answers as well. The redhead continued. Speaking of, I have to go report to General Ironwood. I'll see you guys around. With a casual wave, the Atlesian jogged off. Yes. We must report back to Professor Ojpin as well. Good day, children. And like that, the spastic green-haired history professor was off in blur of movement. Olive approached the group, visibly making an effort to avoid the rolling dust ball of a still fighting Yang and Naruto, and turned to Pira. Remember, Professor Ojpin will want to see you for your own mission report as well. Without a word more, the brunette was off. The group was quiet for a moment, staring in the direction that the others had gone off in. Eventually, though, Blake turned her gaze to the three members of Team NNPR and asked, So how did the mission really go? Ren crossed his arms. We managed to find Naruto's home village, Konoha, hidden deep in uncharted territory. Needless to say, it wasn't exactly in the best of shape. How'd he take it? A very concerned Ruby asked. She and her team had of course been told about how the whiskered teen had reacted to finding his ancestral home in the deplorable state it was in. She could only imagine how much more it would hurt to see his actual home in a similar state. Pira frowned. It wasn't easy for him. You should ask him yourself if you want to really know. Blake and Ruby nodded, understanding that whatever had happened was extremely personal and wasn't something Pira was comfortable with sharing without Naruto's consent. Nora suddenly interjected, breaking up the somewhat somber mood. But he also got to meet his great dash. He got to meet his ancestor. Ben interrupted, putting his hand over Nora's mouth. What? How is that even possible? A highly skeptical Weiss asked. Blake and Ruby were just as curious to know the answer as well. Naruto himself was from a time that was, to them, countless ages old. Naruto's ancestor would logically be even older than that, which would be astonishing. There should be no possible way to meet someone as ancient as that. Chakra and seals, Naruto interjected casually while holding a struggling Yang in a full Nelson. Everyone's sweat dropped at the sight. Due to their height and strength difference, the busty blonde brawler was forced to concede. "Alright, Foxy, I give." Grinning cheekily, Naruto released his hold on his fellow blonde. Ruby, having been the unfortunate target of her sister's games when they were younger, cheered. "Ha! Finally someone put you in your place, you bully!" Cracking her knuckles, Yang turned on her younger sibling. "What was that, Ruby?" Realizing what she had said, the younger of the two was quick to dash and hide behind her fellow team captain. "Protect me, Naruto!" Shaking his head, the whiskered teen ignored the two in favor of explaining himself. "Well, I actually didn't know he was my ancestor until he told me himself. Thing is, he was actually one of the first natural-born chakra user. He was also the one to give chakra as a gift to other people. Like the old man in the story of the four maidens." Blake interjected suddenly. Pyrrha snapped her fingers. "That's why I thought I had heard this story before." Quirking a brow, Naruto asked, "What are you guys talking about?" The raven-haired faunus of Team RWBY answered. "Right, you wouldn't know about the story seeing as how you weren't born in this time." Pyrrha nodded. "The story of the four maidens is an old children's story that tells of how an old man, a wizard, who lived alone in the forest was visited by four maidens. Winter, spring, summer, and fall," Blake added. "Each brought with them something to help the old wizard, doing so out of the kindness of their hearts. At the end of their stay, happier than he had been in ages and moved by the kindness of the maidens, the old wizard used his magic to gift the four with the very powers of nature, giving them the powers to help even more people on their journey." Pyrrha finished. Scratching his chin, Naruto turned to Kurama. "You don't think? It's possible. But then, this is just a story. It could just as easily be the story of Tusama, changed and altered due to the thousands of years that it has been retold." Kurama frowned in thought. "Well, anyways, I was able to meet the sage, because he had a seal created that would hold a piece of his soul until I showed up to activate it." Naruto continued. "Wait, how is that even possible? He would have been long dead by the time you were even born, let alone this far into the future," Blake pointed out. Kurama was the one to answer. "Tusama was not an ordinary existence. He was far beyond what any human could ever hope to achieve. He created myself and my siblings by splitting the power of a primordial god, then created the moon to seal away the body of that same god. His chakra and soul were immensely powerful, so much so that even after death, he lingered, observing the world." "What?" Team RWBY cried in unison. Knowing they'd want an explanation, Naruto told them the tale of Hagoromo Otsutsuki, including the details on Kaguya and her story, while walking back to his team's dorm. By the end of it, a stunned Team RWBY sat with jaws on the floor. They had seen how strong Naruto was, and at one time they had thought that was unbelievable. To learn that there were what amounted to literal gods whom actually walked the earth at some point in time was beyond even that, leaving them dumbfounded. Of course, following that, Naruto told them why the sage had created the seal and why he had needed to talk to him. "So this Kaguya chick is still around causing problems?" Yan asked, her arms crossed under her chest. Sighing, Naruto shrugged. "We don't really know. It's been so long that there shouldn't be any way that she could still be alive. Even the old sage had to eventually pass on, and he was almost as strong as her. I don't think any sort of normal logic works here. After all, we're talking about someone who single-handedly brought an end to all wars with the threat of her power alone," Ren added. "True, but from what we know, that Sasuke guy managed to weaken her to some extent. There's no way that in a weakened state she would be able to live this long," Weiss countered. "Weakened is a relative term here. Even after she was technically dead, her power split into 9 beings, and her body sealed in the moon, she was still able to orchestrate her own revival." Pyrrha answered back. "Gah! This is such a huge pain to think about," Naruto complained. While he had an appreciation for planning ahead, he just wasn't the type to sit and do nothing. He was a man of action, and as far as he was concerned, sitting around and talking about the what-ifs was getting them no closer to any sort of end plan. Pyrrha sighed. "Naruto is right. Unfortunately, we all know far too little to even begin to form any semblance of a plan," Besides that, we just got back from our mission and could use some rest. The 4 members of Team RWBY nodded, realizing just how tired their fellow team looked. See you guys in class tomorrow. Ruby waved goodbye. I'll get you next time, Foxy. Yang grinned as she left. Wise simply left without a word, a seemingly contemplative look on her face. Before making her own exit, Blake told Naruto softly, "When you get time, come find me." The whiskered blonde nodded, assuming the teen faunus wanted to know more about what all had gone on during the mission. Bed. Nora cheered, collapsing onto her mattress. Chuckling, Naruto called out to the orange-haired teen. Nora, you still have to shower. To the rest of Team NPR's amusement, a snore was the only reply the blonde got, Nora having apparently already gone off to dreamland. Wasn't she asleep the whole ride back? Naruto asked aloud. You learn to not question much with Nora after a while. And shrugged, already making his way to the bathroom. Opening the door, the raven-haired teen frowned at the face that greeted him on the other side before calling out. Naruto, you have a guest. Naruto raised a brow and turned to see a familiar set of amber eyes gazing at him from the doorway. Cinder? The raven-haired woman smirked. Neo seems to have had fun on your mission. Understanding the underlying meaning of the otherwise casual statement, Naruto frowned. She was a huge help on it, thanks for sending her. Not a problem. I was just here to ask if you were free to talk for a bit. Cinder asked, although it came off more like a statement than her asking for anything. Although, considering it was Cinder, a woman with looks straight out of a wet dream, a voice that was almost like sex itself, and a smoldering gaze that could stop most anyone with a heartbeat, she was more than likely used to getting her way without much issue. After a quick glance to a frowning Pira, Naruto sighed before getting up. Yeah, I got some time, I guess. After the two left the room, Rin quietly muttered. I have a bad feeling about her. Pira nodded with a frown. I do as well. Naruto followed Cinder, his mind running a mile a minute as he tried to figure out just where she was taking him. While the mysterious woman hadn't exactly done anything outright to earn his ire, she had done enough to warrant his suspicions. Although she had told him her supposed end goal, with someone like her, there was no way he could even be sure that was the truth. With the interlocking webs upon webs she had surrounding her, Naruto just had no way to gauge where he stood with her. I thought all you wanted was some questions answered? Naruto asked, finally breaking up the silence. Cinder glanced at the blonde out of the corner of her eye. I do. Why not start asking then? The blonde asked, frustrated with the curt reply he had got. This, of course, only seemed to amuse his raven-haired companion. I will, but first I figured we should have a little privacy considering the sensitive topic. Naruto simply grumbled to himself. The last couple of weeks had been rather slow with little to no action outside of a few small grim here and there, and he was frankly getting bored. Don't get him wrong, he wasn't a huge fan of having his or any of his friends' lives put in danger, but he would admit that he was a bit of a thrill-seeker. He enjoyed fighting a good opponent and letting actions speak for themselves. Then again, knowing his rotten/great luck, this little respite was sure to come to an end sometime soon. Thankfully, Cinder came to a stop, though Naruto had to raise a brow at the choice of venue. It was an empty classroom. Pretty sure this is how one of Erosenen's books started, Naruto thought with a sweat drop. Cinder's smoky voice simultaneously brought him back to the situation at hand while also serving to further his concern about what the raven-haired woman had planned for him. Perfect, don't you think? Sure? Naruto answered, somewhat nervous now. His demeanor did a complete turnaround when the amber-eyed woman revealed an all-too-familiar ring. The last of the rings belonging to the infamous terrorist group known simply as Akatsuki. Cinder intoned. You've been doing some research. Naruto answered tersely. While he had been gifted 8 of the 9 rings he now had, Cinder had made no mention that she knew what they were for or why they were important. She of course knew there was some significance to them due to his reaction towards the items, but he had thought that was all she knew. That was apparently no longer the case. A pit formed in Naruto's stomach as Cinder continued. 10 rings. 10 powerful rogue shinobi. 9 monstrous forces of nature. 1 all-powerful primordial being known simply as the RWBY. Clenching his fists and gritting his teeth, Naruto bit out. What do you want, Cinder? What are you getting at? Cinder smirked. I assume that you know the story of the 4 maidens and the old wizard, yes? This did nothing to calm Naruto's growing nerves. What of it? Cinder's next move threw even Naruto. The most surprising ninja. for a loop. In a fluid and seductive flow of motions, the raven-haired woman casually tossed the ring to the Jinchuriki and seated herself atop a nearby desk, one creamy leg crossed over the other. Nothing at all. It was an interesting story, especially when we know so little about our own history in this day and age. Yet you possess knowledge of a time even before such myths. Pocketing the final Akatsuki ring, Naruto crossed his arms and gazed at Cinder, questions bouncing around his head. Why do all of this? Finding these rings was probably not all that easy, and then you let me borrow Neo for that mission. I know you want me to help you, but I've already told you I won't, so why? What's it like? Cinder asked, completely dodging the question like she had the rest of them. Growing progressively more irritated, Naruto growled. What are you talking about? Chakra. What's it feel like to use and have a power that allowed the shinobi of old to perform almost godlike feats? Cinder clarified. Raising a brow, the whiskered Uzumaki seemed to ponder the question before answering. It's warm and really gets you pumped. It makes you feel almost invincible, and when you use it to do a really powerful jutsu, it's almost relieving, I guess. Cinder took in the answer, her amber eyes scanning Naruto like she was seeing him for the very first time. Who trained you to use your chakra? Naruto was suddenly unsure of how he should answer that. If he told her the truth, even without telling her the details of the academy and such, the fact that several people were able to teach him would raise more questions that would lead to Cinder quickly being able to piece together even more of his story. Quickly, the blonde decided to go the route he had with his teammates and friends upon first meeting them. My godfather did. He took me under his wing and taught me almost all I know. Everything else I learned by myself. Cinder tilted her head and gazed directly into his eyes as if she were about to call him on his slight bluff. A few tense moments later, and she seemed satisfied by the answer. Interesting. Without a word more, Cinder smoothly stood to her feet and began making her way to the exit. Naruto, completely caught off guard, could do little more than watch as she left, leaving him in a classroom lit by the dim light of a sunset. What the hell just happened? This is different for you, Blake calmly observed. Laid out on the grassy cliff they had been launched from during initiation, using his jacket as a pillow, Naruto peered at the standing Faunus. Gotta keep things fresh. Smiling at the ball of sunshine, the teen Faunus took a seat next to him. So, how was the mission really? Taking a moment to gather his thoughts, Naruto replied. It was eye-opening. I finally know what happened after I was sent here and even managed to find Konoha. That was difficult, but I'm thankful that Pira, Nora, and Ren were there with me. Blake hummed. If you ever need someone, you know that we're all here for you, right? Naruto smiled. Yeah, I do, and I couldn't thank you guys enough for that. So, reincarnation? The raven-haired teen asked, having recalled what her friend had told her and the others earlier in the day. The way it had been described had reminded her of one of her favorite books, A Man with Two Souls. Naruto chuckled at the less than subtle question. Well, I don't have memories of a past life or anything like that, so I don't think it counts as reincarnation. A small smile appeared on Blake's face. Then what is it? Far as the old sage said, it was called transmigration. Something about how strong chakras remain after their owner dies and finds a new host. In this case, I got one of his sons, Azura's chakra. Naruto explained as best he could. I assume that comes with some kind of perk? Naruto shrugged. Not that I know of. The old sage mentioned not being able to give me my birthright as a child of my blood, but he did say that me and Kurama still have some power or something to unlock. Blake hummed, not at all surprised to learn that her blonde friend still had room to grow even stronger. In her mind, Naruto just didn't have the limits most people seem to have, even if you took chakra and everything else out of the equation. The blonde was someone who pushed himself to the brink and then went further than that, all in the name of wanting to make sure his friends and loved ones were safe and happy. It was that force of will and sheer stubbornness that let him smash through the walls and plateaus others would have been stopped by. Her thoughts turning to her blonde friend, the young Fauna soon found herself wondering how different her life would have been if she had met Naruto at a younger age. A lot had happened to her in her younger years to shape her into the person she is today, and yet Naruto had so easily changed a lot of that, bringing down the walls she surrounded herself with after leaving a group she had thought of as family. That train of thought brought up the question, would she have even thought of joining the White Fang if Naruto had been in her life? That was the million-dollar question that kept nagging her. However, thinking about the White Fang brought up her most recent memories of the activist group turned terrorists, and they were less than pleasant. Naruto didn't need any sort of extra sense to know that Blake was frustrated and worried about something. Something wrong? Knowing it was pointless to try and lie to the blonde, Blake sighed. It's just the white fang. I still don't get why they're working with someone like Torchwick. They're clearly up to something big, and it bothers me that no one is doing anything about it. We're just sitting around acting like nothing's wrong. Naruto nodded before rising to his feet and offering a hand to the still-seated teen. Despite being highly confused, Blake still took the offered hand. Where are we going? Simple. You said it bothers you that no one's doing anything about this whole white fang thing, so we're going to go do something about it. Naruto grinned. Watching the taller teen begin to walk off, Blake raced to catch up. Naruto! It's not that simple. We have no idea what they're planning or even how to go about digging up any info. Besides, what are just me and you going to do? Not in the least bit deterred by her logic, Naruto kept on casually walking back to Beacon. Well, it doesn't have to be just me and you. We both have teammates who'd be more than happy to help, and you're forgetting. Super awesome ninja here. This will be a cakewalk. Blake sighed and shook her head. I don't even know why I try arguing with you. Naruto offered a cheeky grin in reply. Chapter 28. Couldn't resist, could you? Ren asked as he finished getting ready for the self-imposed mission ahead. Taking the jab at his thrill-seeking ways, Naruto grinned. I was getting pretty bored. So you consider finding lost villages and trekking into uncharted, grim-filled territory boring? Pira asked with a chuckle. Naruto only laughed, somewhat abashed, in response. I'm just excited we get to try out our new outfits. Nora cried in her usual exuberance. The orange-haired teen proceeded to prance around the room, showing off her new set of clothes. While she had kept her pink skirt, a pair of black leggings now covered her legs, ending in a pair of all-pink ankle boots. The boots had sections of white outlining them and bore her signature hammer symbol on either side of the ankles. Gone was her white top with a heart-shaped hole, replaced by a light gray, long-sleeved, V-neck shirt with a heart split by a lightning bolt and pink emblazoned over her chest. Over top that she wore a sleeveless white vest, her hammer and lightning bolt symbol etched into the back of it in her usual shade of pink. Stretching out an arm and buttoning up his new coat, Ren examined the cloth. Achievement Hunter did do a really good job on these. While Nora had opted for covering more skin, Ren had taken the opposite direction, his emerald tail coat replaced by a sleeveless and thinner one of a similar color. However, the black portion was now a simple stripe that stretched from his abdomen to his collar. The coat didn't button up all the way and exposed the tight black shirt he wore underneath the much longer coat. Etched into the back of the emerald overcoat was Ren's lotus symbol in the same shade of magenta as his eyes and hair. His pants, like his top, hadn't changed all that much except they now only reached to the top portion of his ankles and billowed out, allowing for more freedom of movement. I must admit, I do like the change, Pira added, admiring her own set of clothes. Out of the three, the redhead had been the one whose change in clothing was the most drastic. The emerald-eyed teen had done away with her pieces of armor almost entirely, her torso now covered by a somewhat flowing and loose white top with gold lace embroidered in random patterns. Her mini skirt had also been swapped out for a pair of fitted brown shorts that reached to her mid-thigh. Despite having changed much of her outfit, Pira had opted to keep the flowing stretch of red cloth tied around her waist, held up now by a golden plate with her shield and spear emblem etched into it. One of the most drastic changes to her look was the decision to get rid of the bronze circlet that helped to keep her hair in place. Now, her crimson locks softly framed her face. Her ponytail was now tied up by a thin length of golden-colored lace that weaved into her hair as well. While she had also kept the armlet on her upper arm, Pira had decided to not wear her opera-style gloves, leaving her alabaster skin exposed. The whole change had surprised her teammates, none more so than Naruto who, upon seeing his partner with her new look, had walked straight into a wall. Speaking of the blonde, the whiskered teen had also changed his style up. His formerly all-black and rather thick jacket had been swapped out for a much thinner one with dark burnt orange sleeves, the Uzumaki spiral still present on each shoulder. He had also decided to swap out his black shirt for a simple white one with a swirl of fire that represented the will of fire. His Uzushio Hideate now hung loosely around his neck, allowing his blonde spikes to fall around his face again. Flexing his arms and admiring the extremely soft and flexible material, Naruto nodded. Yeah, this even beats some of the stuff we had during my time. Surprised that Ryan and Gavin managed to not kill each other when they were making these, Ren smirked. I wouldn't be so sure. I heard Ryan plotting something as we were leaving. The team of 4 shared a laugh as they imagined the madhouse that the Achievement Hunter shop was right now. Foxy, came an all too familiar and boisterous voice. Naruto shook his head as Yang barged into their room without any sort of preamble. Within a few short moments, he was being suffocated by his fellow blonde's impressive pair of assets. New clothes? You know just how to treat a girl. Yang cheered. Managing to free himself from the mounds of doom, the whiskered teen took in the sight of Team RWBY, decked out in their own set of new clothes courtesy of the Achievement Hunter crew. Yang's new set of clothes, while covering more than her usual set did, made her seem even more alluring. The busted brawler now wore a cream-colored coat over top a black top, both of which left a considerable amount of cleavage visible. A black sort of half-jacket that only covered her collarbone and neck had sleeves that reached to just past her elbows, ending in a gold coloring. Several black and gold belts hung loosely around her hips, tied to which was a simple purple and lilac-colored piece of cloth. Covering her legs were a pair of black stockings, bearing her burning heart symbol in a vibrant gold. Ruby was now wearing a gray long-sleeved shirt, over top which was a black pinafore with red laces dangling from each side. She of course still wore her cloak/cape, though this one seemed more scarf-like as it was much more thickly bundled around her neck. Her skirt had also been swapped out for a red one, her rose emblem printed in black on it. Her legs were covered by all black stockings which were tucked into her red and black boots. Blake had donned a white zip-up, V-neck shirt with black trim that left her toned stomach visible. Barely visible on her left side was her belladonna flower symbol in a light gray that almost matched the white of her shirt. The young fauness had also swapped out her usual black and purple leggings for a pair of form-fitting black pants with a gray stripe stretching vertically down the outside of each leg. A black belt hung around her hips, around the backside of which hung a layer of black cloth over top another, longer, layer of a see-through purple cloth. Weiss had gone for a much simpler look than her usual one, swapping out her bolero and skirt combo for a single-piece dress in white that matched her snow-like hair. The insides, buttons, and frilly bottom parts of the dress were a contrasting black though, adding a little flavor to the new outfit. Her snowflake emblem was branded across the back of the outfit in a light blue. Her legs were covered by a pair of thigh-high, white, high-heeled boots. Weiss rolled her eyes. They are kind of nice. Ruby chuckled. What Weiss is trying to say is, thank you for the new clothes. And they are really awesome. Used to Weiss' usual behavior, Naruto grinned. Yeah, I know how Princess is. Hey! What's that supposed to mean? I doubt these are just some new clothes for the sake of it, so what's so different about them? Blake asked curiously, ignoring her indignant teammate. Naruto scratched his head. I honestly wasn't paying all that much attention. Gavin and Ryan were going on about something to do with weaving some kind of lightweight steel and dust, or something. All I got was that they're way more durable and kind of like armor. That caught Weiss' interest. I've worn clothes infused with dust and none it is near as light and comfortable as this. Naruto shrugged. Beats me. The snow-haired heiress sighed in frustration. Why am I not surprised? Nora, done prancing around, jumped in to defend her captain. Because he wouldn't be Captain Whiskers otherwise. Thanks? Naruto's sweat dropped, not sure if the hammer wielder knew she had just given him a rather backhanded compliment, even if it was unintentional. Deciding to move forward with their not-so-little mission, Ruby interjected. So what's our game plan? Pyrrha, having been one of the ones responsible for the plan, spoke up. Weiss and Ruby, you two will head to the CCT to check the records for any recent robberies or other odd inconsistencies. Weiss smirked. As a member of the Schnee family, that shouldn't be too hard. You got it! Ruby cheered. Naruto stepped up next. Me and Blake will see if we can find and get into a white fan rally. See if we can get any info there. Ren crossed his arms. Nora and I will head for the docks again, see if there is anything left behind that could be useful. And I have an old friend on the shady side of town. Me and Pyrrha will head over there and see if he knows anything. Yang added. With a round of nods and cheers, the group of teens was off. I always forget how big the tower is. Ruby practically gushed as she gazed at the several stories tall structure. Weiss smirked. You should see the one in Atlas. Ruby snapped her fingers. I totally forgot, you're from Atlas. Weiss sighed in frustration as she rubbed her forehead. What do you mean you forgot? The red and black-haired team captain abashedly rubbed her head. Kinda just slipped my mind. Oh God, he's rubbing off on her. Weiss thought in horror. Wait, doesn't that mean you would know General Ironwood? Ruby asked curiously. I do. My sister, Winter, actually works for him, the Schnee heiress admitted. Filing away the fact that her partner had a sister, the younger teen asked. Do you know why he doesn't like Naruto? Weiss sighed. General Ironwood isn't exactly the most liberal person. He's very strict about certain matters and works in a very militaristic fashion. He no doubt knows about Team NPR having been forced into active duty, but with as childish as Naruto usually is, General Ironwood wouldn't exactly be too happy with him, especially considering he's the team leader. Ruby frowned. Well, what does it matter how Naruto acts? Professor Ojban trusts Naruto, and we know that he's a great leader. Yes, we know that, but General Ironwood doesn't, and he's in a position of power, so his words carry more weight than ours do. Weiss answered. Before the two could carry on with their conversation, a familiar shock of orange and green caught Ruby's eyes. Penny! The ginger-haired teen waved cheerily. Salutations. Hey guys. Another familiar voice called out. Turning, both Ruby and Weiss weren't at all surprised to see John jogging up to them, remembering that he was Penny's caretaker of sorts. Rolling her eyes and knowing they'd only get sidetracked, Weiss said, Ruby, we have something important to take care of, remember? Maybe I can help. Penny chimed in. A look of slight hesitation and unease crossed John's face for a second as he recalled one of the more important parts of being Penny's friend/handler. Penny, I don't think they need our help. After all, weren't there some stores you wanted to see? Before anyone could react, the blonde Elysian was dragging his charge away at a rather quick pace, garnering raised brows from Ruby and Weiss. Well, that was weird, Weiss summed up. Ruby frowned. Yeah, that was really weird. Oh well, we got other things to worry about. The Schnee heiress shrugged off, already making her way to the large structure that was the CCT. You go on. I'm going to try and figure out what's going on with those two. Ruby called back, racing away. Massaging her forehead, the snow-haired heiress began to mutter a mantra to herself. Coming to Vale was a good idea. Coming to Vale was a good idea. This is the spot. Yang called out, stepping off her personalized motorcycle in one clean and smooth movement. Pyrrha sighed as she dismounted the machine, shakily regaining her sense of gravity. Yang, who gave you your license? Threading her fingers through her hair to rid it of any helmet hair or knots, the blonde quirked a brow. My what? The redhead's sweat dropped. Never mind. Turning, the two regarded the warehouse-like building before them, Pyrrha with a small amount of trepidation and Yang with curiosity. Junior must have renovated or something, Yang remarked casually, noticing the remodeled front section. Shrugging, the blonde sauntered off to the entrance, Pyrrha following suit. To Pyrrha's curiosity, the two presumed bouncers took one look at the pair before rushing into the building with a look of fear painted across their faces, slamming the doors behind them. Instead of being shocked or even deterred, Yang grinned. Looks like we get an entrance. Without any sort of warning, the blonde team marched up to the doors and punched them into splinters with a war cry. Yang and Naruto should never have children, Pyrrha mentally decided, not out of a sense of jealousy, but out of worry and fear of what the two blondes making babies would bring upon the world. Images of small, blonde, blue and purple-eyed children running around with super strength, the power of the elements at their beck and call, and a general disregard or care for any sense of decency or normalcy raced through the redhead's mind. Pyrrha shivered. Shoving that image into the deeper levels of her memory, hopefully to be forgotten, the redhead followed after her temporary partner. Walking through the doors, or what remained of them, Pyrrha sighed and had to resist the urge to put palm to face. Guess who's back? Yang called out. The next instant, dozens of guns were all trained on the blonde who didn't even flinch. A less than pleased look slowly formed on Yang's face as she crossed her arms and frowned. Stop! Stop! Would you idiots just put the damn guns away? A voice called out. Junior forced his way through his employees and examined the pair of teens before him before turning to address Yang. Blondie, you're back, with a friend, why? Said Busta. Teen smirked as she marched up to the club owner, grabbing him by the arm and roughly dragging him to the bar counter. You still owe me a drink. Pyrrha frowned when the eyes of the club workers turned to her with less than savory grins on their faces. Before the inevitable catcalls and such could begin, the redhead made her way to stand with Yang. Look, I don't know anything, Blondie. Last I talked to him was months ago when he asked for some of my men. We couldn't even finish the deal before him and his damn sidekick started something with some blonde and his pet fox. Junior grit out in frustration. Both Yang and Pyrrha looked at each other in surprise at the mention of a blonde and a fox, something which sounded eerily familiar. He wouldn't have happened to have whisker marks and carry a staff, would he? Pyrrha asked. Junior frowned. Yeah. Brad had come in here and was just drinking before Torchwick had to bother him. Would have kicked them both out if I had known his pet fox was gonna blow out the whole front of this place. Naruto drinks? The two teens unknowingly thought at the same time. Pyrrha thought about it for a moment before recalling that Naruto had mentioned that during his time, most bars would allow shinobi of any age to drink, operating on the principle of old enough to kill, old enough to drink. Even still, she had never taken her partner for the type to indulge in the bottle. Seeing as they had gotten all they could out of the shady club owner, the two decided to cut their losses, making their way out. Hopefully the others are having more luck than we are. Jan lamented. Claw marks? Really? Real inconspicuous. Naruto snarked as he followed Blake. Rolling her eyes, the cat fauness continued to follow the lead of the claw marks, knowing that it was how the White Fang led others to their recruiting meetings. You have bright blonde hair and wear orange. I don't think you can talk about being inconspicuous. Hey, I know damn well how to be sneaky when I want to. Naruto protested. Remembering the story of how he had painted a literal mountain in bright daylight wearing an even brighter shade of orange, Blake had to give this one to the whiskered teen. Peeking around a corner, the two were relieved to see that they had finally found the apparent meeting spot, faunus of varying ages making their way into the warehouse. Wanting to make sure that no one would question him for a lack of animalistic features, Naruto funneled a small amount of Kurama's chakra through his body, thickening his whiskers, turning his eyes a crimson red, and extending his canines. A henge would have probably worked just as well, but authenticity was often the better disguise. The shinobi and huntress to be casually made their way up to the warehouse, greeted by an unassuming older gentleman who handed them each a visor that looked like the one most of the terrorist/activist group wore. Curious, Naruto had to ask. Any reason these masks look like a Grimm's? Placing hers on and pushing aside the rush of memories the familiar mask brought, Blake explained. Most people saw us as monsters, so we decided to don the masks of monsters. Naruto frowned as he placed his on. So instead of fighting against that prejudice, you gave in and became what they said you were. Being no stranger to the prejudice of humans, Naruto was familiar with the idea of giving in to the hate and becoming the beast others painted you as. There had been many a time, especially after finding out about being Kurama's Jinchuriki, that the temptation of lashing out was all too inviting. However, like Jiraiya and the Sandaime had taught him, returning hate with hate would only bring more hate, breeding pain and suffering, which would in turn lead to death and would then lead to even more hate, perpetuating the cycle that had consumed the era of chakra for generations. Blake flinched, but could not argue. After many a conversation with her blonde friend, she had come to realize why Naruto wasn't fond of the White Fang and its current actions. She also couldn't fault him for his distaste either, knowing that he was familiar with the strife the faunus people were faced with on a daily basis. Filing those thoughts away, the pair became highly alert as they entered the open space of the warehouse, seeing a shockingly good blend of initiated White Fang members as well as what appeared to be aspiring recruits dressed in casual clothes. Walking onto the stage, a man wearing a full mask with a muscled and tattooed form spoke out. Thank you all for coming! For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'd like to introduce to you a very special comrade of ours. I can assure you, he is the key to obtaining what we have fought for so long. Roman Torchwick's appearance on stage was not well received, some of the White Fang members just as surprised and outraged as the initiates were. Naruto peeked out of the corner of his eyes to see Blake clenching her fist tightly, barely holding herself back from lashing out at the orange-haired crime boss. Returning his attention to the stage, Naruto frowned. While he was not at all a fan of the man, Torchwick knew how to talk to people. A few words and he had already gained the trust of those gathered at the rally, as uneasy as it was. The former shinobi had to resist the urge to growl out as he was reminded of a certain snake Sannin. The vile man had been just as charismatic, his words a sweet poison that had gained him the loyalty of many a shinobi, despite the horrid way he treated them. Thankfully, Torchwick was either as powerful or as evil as Orochimaru was. The rogue shinobi had gone as far as human experimentation and defiling the dead in his attempt to evade his own mortality, twisting his soul and body into a monstrous form that had no longer been human, or even resembled the man he had once been. Fortunately, I'm the best exterminator around. No offense to any rodents in the room. Torchwick smugly finished. With a snap of his finger, the white fan banner that had been hanging from the ceiling fell away, revealing a large mechanized behemoth armed to the teeth with various guns and explosives. Naruto's eyes widened as he looked upon the hulking machine. That can't be good. How did he get his hands on that? Blake whispered in panic. This was far more than they had originally intended to find, not only because of what they were looking at, but because it meant so much more. This wasn't simply a move to show off some muscle or to prove a point. No, this was the beginnings of all-out war. Naruto's mind was racing a mile a minute as Torchwick continued his speech, admitting that the White Fang and his group had managed to steal more of these, apparently at Legion, mechs. Apparently, the White Fang itself had also relocated elsewhere, preparing for something big. What the hell are you planning, Cinder? Naruto mentally growled. She's preparing to wage a full-scale war, Kurama solemnly replied, taking in what his container saw from the seal with a grimace. Would all new recruits please move forward? The White Fang spokesman called out. Noticing that they were quickly becoming the center of attention as they weren't moving anywhere, Naruto called out. Blake! Lights! Nodding, the raven-haired teen took aim and shot out the circuit breaker, plunging the warehouse into darkness. Shouts and calls for retaliation followed, Naruto and Blake quickly making their exit through a second-story window. Following right behind them was the Elysian mech, Torchwick piloting it from the inside, as it tore through the concrete wall with ease. Without a word, the two teens took to the roofs, both jumping from building to building with a practiced ease, somewhat surprising Naruto as he had yet to meet someone who could travel in such a very shinobi way. Pushing that thought to the back of his mind, Naruto reached into his jacket and pulled out his scroll, quickly calling the rest of his team and Team RWBY. Guys! We need backup! ASAP! Weiss, coming out of the CTT after having scoured through the databanks, listened. There's a huge mech thing the White Fang managed to get their hands on, and it is tearing its way through the city. Could use some help. Rolling her eyes, the Shinee heiress began to sprint off, following the sounds of destruction in the distance. Ruby grinned as Naruto continued. Holy crap, it just took out an entire building. Could really use that backup. I am so not missing out on this. The young teen cheered, disappearing in a burst of speed. No, seriously, guys. We have got to stop this thing before. Oh, well, there goes that mall. Oh, we get to fight a Gundam. Nora cheered with a sparkle in her eyes. Nora! Ren called out, already sprinting off. Coming, Ren! Where are you guys? Yang questioned, her and Pira already situated on her bike. Over here! Naruto called out as he, Blake, and the mech sped past the alley where Yang and Pira were waiting. Yang's sweat dropped as she revved her motorcycle. Leave it to Foxy. Naruto spared a quick glance behind himself, watching as the mech was incredibly able to follow him and Blake as they leapt onto a highway. In that same moment, he caught a flash of yellow and red quickly catching up to the rampaging machine. Looks like our backup is coming in! Naruto cried over the roar of the winds as he leapt onto the hood of another car. Turning around and planting his feet, he continued. Let's give him a hand! Blake followed his example, readying Gamble's shroud. With a poise and sense of balance gained from years of grueling training, Pira stood atop the back end of Yang's bike as it tore down the highway, Milo in rifle form. Likewise, Naruto pulled out Hi-No Ishi, aiming down the barrel at the Elysian machine rampaging towards them. Before Torchwick could do much of anything, he was being jostled within the mech as 3 sets of gunfire rained down on him. Taking note of where the gunfire was coming from, the crime boss moved the mech to grab a passing vehicle, flinging it at an extremely caught-off-guard Naruto. Naruto! Pira cried, watching the vehicle as well as her teammate go sailing over the edge of the highway. She and Yang were given no respite either though, Roman purposefully moving into the traffic and knocking back several cars aimed at taking them out. Seeing one headed right for her, Pira pushed off Yang's bike as the blonde swerved to move out of the way. Using a slight amount of polarity manipulation, the redhead scaled the car, sprung off it as it reached the apex of its arc, and landed on the machine, plunging Neo through it. With her hand pulsing a dark gray, Pira used her semblance and began to literally bend and peel away the metal of the machine with ridiculous ease. What the hell is she doing? Roman cried as light began to leak into the cockpit. Realizing that he would have to quickly rid himself of the redhead lest she pop open his new weapon like a can opener, Torchwick made to jump into the quickly approaching highway above them, intent on smashing Pira between the concrete structure and him. That plan was just as quickly derailed. Yahoo! With a flash of pink and a shout, Nora came flying onto the scene like she had been fired out of a cannon. Seeing her teammate, Pira called out, "Nora! Magnet Crush!" An even bigger grin crossed Nora's face at hearing the combo attack. Before Torchwick even had time to reevaluate his plan, Pira was using her semblance to pull Manghilde towards her, greatly increasing Nora's own acceleration. With a sound similar to a clap of thunder, Manghilde met Elysian machinery with the force of a speeding train, plowing into the hulking mech and sending it rocketing through the nearby highway supports. Having leapt off the machine at the last possible moment, Pira landed with a soft thud, keeping an eye on the downed machine. The rest of her team, as well as the girls of Team RWBY, were quick to catch up, all of them ready to rush into the fight. Naruto, having been thrown off the edge, casually walked back onto the highway using chakra. RWBY was the first to speak out, equally excited and curious about Pira and Nora's attack. "What was that?" Nora grinned. "That's what I call a good smashing." Guys, it's getting back up," Blake announced with a frown. "That thing can sure as hell take a beating," Naruto remarked casually. Weiss chimed in. "My family and the Elysian R&D department have been working on the Paladin for years now. There's no way they'd send them out into the field if they couldn't sustain a lot of damage from Grimm and Huntsman alike. Any ideas on how to take it down, Princess?" Naruto asked, absent-mindedly twirling Hi-No Ishi. The Shnee heiress sighed. "As loath as I am to say it, hit it hard and hit it fast." Nora, Naruto, and Yang grinned. "You just said the magic words, Princess." Without a word more, the three heavy hitters leapt off the highway, falling to the empty area below them. Pira shrugged before following their lead, RWBY joining her with a grin on her face. Ren and Blake sighed simultaneously before joining their teammates. Weiss stood for a moment longer. "Hopefully no one back home hears about this. Doubt they'd be happy to hear I helped to destroy one of the new paladins." Down below, Roman was forcing the paladin to move, a sneer stretched across his face as blood streamed from his forehead. "Really should install some kind of seatbelts in this damn thing." A rushing Naruto, Nora, and Yang gave him no more time to make any more jokes. Before he could even begin to make an attack, Yang was on him, throwing a powerful strike at the cockpit. However, the armor of the paladin proved to be made of a tougher stuff, barely suffering a dent. With the flick of a control, Torchwick smashed a robotic arm into the blonde brawler, sending her flying. "Cannonball Nora!" Whee! Roman was again violently jostled around inside the Elysian mech as Nora's hammer smashed into the paladin. Nora quickly hopped away as the two males of Team NNPR were already speeding towards the still-stunned mech. "Run! Bolt Flower!" Quickly and without the need for seals, Naruto created a Kage Bunshin which Ren used as a springboard. Landing with a handstand on top of the paladin, Ren unleashed a stream of bullets straight down into the joints of the mech. Shifting his center of gravity, the long-haired teen cartwheeled, striking with a flurry of slashes from Storm Flower. Gracefully landing on his feet, Ren dismounted with a quick jump and a flip, still firing bullets as he did so. He was met by Naruto, who had swiftly passed through the mech's legs, using the blade of Hi-No Ishi to let loose his own whirlwind of attacks. With a seamless and rehearsed grace, the two swapped places, Naruto hitting high while Ren hit low. Sparks flew as the two males ran circles around Roman and his machine, dealing more and more damage with each successive pass. Finally, having had enough, Roman used all of his strength to move the arms of the paladin, smashing them into the ground with enough force to crater it, and throw both Ren and Naruto off balance for a quick second, a second the flame-haired criminal took advantage of, lashing out with rapid gunfire from the paladin's mounted guns. Naruto and Ren were quick to retreat, though their spots were quickly filled by a rushing RWBY and Blake. "Ladybug!" Sparks flew as Crescent Rose sliced into the mech, tearing through the mech like the claw of an angry beast. Gamble Shroud carved out several of its own jagged grooves in a blur of slashes and gunfire. Roman was again put on the defensive as the fastest and most nimble members of Team RWBY ricocheted around him in blurs of crimson and black. The two young ladies were forced to retreat though as an increasingly furious Torchwick unleashed a plethora of missiles, intent on ridding himself of the bothersome teens. Seeing the missiles speeding towards her and the others, Weiss stepped forward. With her usual poise and grace, the Shnee heiress plunged Murdernaster into the ground and erected a wall of jagged ice spikes. The crystal-like structure exploded in a shower of flakes and snow, having done its job and protected those behind it from the flying explosives. Out of the cloud of smoke and ice, Yang came charging out with a war cry, eager to rejoin the fray. The blonde's fist collided with the Elysian paladin with a crack of fire and enough power to dent the hard metal armor. However, she was not quick enough to dodge Roman's retaliation, a cold metallic fist that sent her tumbling into a concrete support pillar. Cracks in the structure formed and chunks of concrete were dislodged as Yang's body harshly collided with the pillar. Roman pushed the paladin to speed forward, intent on finishing off one of the brats that had been a rather bothersome thorn in his side. "Leave her alone!" Blake cried out, appearing between her teammate and the charging mech. "Weiss! Use it!" Naruto suddenly cried out, worried for both of his friends. Without any kind of acknowledgement, the snow-haired heiress sprung into action, waving both Murdernaster and her fingers to form a completely new and untested rune, one she was sure not even Winter had thought of, one created as a joint project between herself and Naruto. A trail of dark violet energy followed her fingers as Weiss focused on forming the intricate array, pouring both her aura and concentration into the construct. With a final wave of her fingers and her weapon, an encompassing circle of archaic and unknown symbols spun into life below the paladin, the large design glowing a vibrant and royal shade of purple. In that exact moment, the hulking metal behemoth was ground to a halt, and even forced to its knees. The others looked on in awe as Weiss was visibly using all her might and power to do whatever it was she was doing to the paladin. Sweat began to dot her brow as she pushed her semblance even further, which in turn caused the sound of creaking joints and metal to ring through the air. Seeing the opportunity granted to them, Pyrrha and the others attempted to rush the downed and trapped mech, only for Naruto to call out, "Stop! Don't go near that thing!" Curious eyes regarded the blonde, forcing him to answer. "This is a rune me and Weiss have been designing. Anything within its circle of influence is put under an intensified field of gravity. If you jumped in, it'd probably crush your bones and insides." As if to prove his point, sparks began to fly from the paladin as even louder groans and creaks were heard, the glowing of the rune intensifying as well. Naruto hoped that Weiss would have enough energy to crush the mech under an insane amount of pressure, but he had underestimated just how much punishment the machine could take, and Weiss was already pushing herself to her limits, this being the first time their creation was used in live combat. Despite that, he had to admit that he was rather proud to see something he had helped to make doing what it was intended to. If this was what Weiss and the gravity rune were capable of doing to a thousands of pounds armored behemoth, he could only imagine what it would do to Grimm, or even a human enemy. However, seeing the somewhat disappointed look on Yang's face, Naruto formed a new idea. "Yang! You and me?" Seeing the feral grin on her fellow blonde's face, the Bustatine felt a pleasant shiver crawl down her spine, bringing one of her own grins out. "How could I say no?" The two blondes bumped fists, each letting loose their power at that exact moment. Yang's semblance flared to life, changing her lilac eyes into a light shade of crimson, while her blonde mane seemed to gain an almost ethereal glow to it, making it seem like flowing gold. While this wasn't the height of what her semblance could do for her, she had taken enough damage to give her an edge. Naruto flared his own chakra while drawing on the energy of nature, bringing on his sage mode, amber eyes and all. With as much chakra as he was letting loose, a light blue luminescent shroud had formed around him. The visible chakra flowed and danced around him like a living flame. The two blondes stepped away from their awestruck teammates, moving in such a synchronized fashion that it looked like they had been doing this for years. The similarities ended there though, as Yang cocked Ember Celica with a casual flick of her wrists while Naruto held out his hand, a Rasengan whirring into existence. "Think we can hit it hard enough?" Yang asked sarcastically, knowing full well that the mass of metal and tech would not survive the two of them. Naruto grinned, creating two shadow clones. One grabbed the arm that wasn't holding the spinning ball of doom while the other grabbed Yang's. "Oh, we will." Without another word, the two clones moved as one and used their strength to begin spinning their creator and his fellow blonde. With a war cry and a feral glint to each of their eyes, Naruto and Yang were sent tearing through the air. Right as they were just about to enter the field of Weiss gravity rune, the heiress released the breast she had been holding, collapsing to her knees. Without a source of energy, the sprawling circle of runes collapsed and disappeared, releasing the paladin. However, the timing had been perfect and Roman could do nothing but watch and brace himself for impact. Fist and condensed ball of chakra met the armor of the paladin with an explosion of power and force. For a split second, the protective layer of metal held strong. However, the grinding nature of the Rasengan proved far more powerful as it began to tear through the material like it was paper. Likewise, Yang's monstrous strength forced the armor to groan and give way. Together, the two pushed all their energy into their strike and let it loose. The resulting explosion of chakra and aura sent the paladin spinning through the air like a bullet. The airborne mech collided with pillar after pillar, each collision destroying it further and further before it eventually could take no more and simply exploded in a shower of metal shrapnel. A heavily wounded and clearly bleeding Torchwick lay on the cold concrete, coughing and moaning in pain, surrounded by the remains of the now destroyed paladin. The two teams approached the downed criminal with weapons raised, ready just in case he tried anything underhanded. Looking at the man, Naruto couldn't shrug off the feeling that something was wrong. His eyes scanned the surroundings, seeing nothing. However, since he was still in Senin Moto, his ability to sense out others was heavily amplified. It was thanks to this that he was able to pick out the energy signature of a quickly moving Torchwick and Neo. Growling, the blonde surprised everyone when he viciously struck out with a slash from Hi-No Ishii's blade. However, instead of watching an already wounded Roman Torchwick be turned into mincemeat, they were instead treated to the sight and sound of glass breaking. Wide-eyed, the others watched as the image before them fell away, revealing that Naruto had only carved out a small trench in the concrete floor. The sound of laughing and the roar of an engine caught everyone's attention. With frowns, Team RWBY and NNPR watched as Roman was carried away by a bullhead. "What the heck was that?" Ruby cried out, completely confused. As Naruto's eyes bled back into their usual shade of blue, he answered, "An illusion, a very good one." Yang huffed. "Well, that's not fair." Regaining his usual carefree demeanor, Naruto grinned. "As fair as it would have been if we let Pyrrha handle that big hunk of metal." The members of Team RWBY quirked a brow, confused by what he meant. Sure, Pyrrha was strong, no doubt about that, but strong enough to fight that thing by herself? That was a little unbelievable. "Pyrrha can control metal!" Nora exclaimed. "Yeah, she probably would have just torn that thing apart with her bare hands," Naruto praised. A faint red hue dusted the redhead's alabaster cheeks. "Well, actually I can control polarity so dash." A giddy Ruby interrupted the older teen. "That's so cool!" Naruto watched with a grin as his friends all began to relax, returning to their normal demeanor and antics. However, he and Kurama were having a very different conversation through their link. "So what are we going to do now, brat?" Cinder has made it clear that she plans to wage an all-out war to achieve her goals. "We stop her, simple as that," Naruto concluded with a hint of steel to his voice. He had seen the horrors that war brought on, and he'd be damned if he sat back and watched Vale meet the same fate as Konoha. Memories of Obito and his army of white Setsu and reanimated corpses razing Konoha to the ground to get to him flashed through Naruto's mind, his fists clenching and unclenching. Then we better get started on getting even stronger. I doubt Cinder has anything that could possibly pose us a challenge, but with Kaguya still skulking around in whatever form, it'd do us well to be prepared for anything, Kurama intoned. Naruto nodded firmly. There were far too many unanswered questions and variables to simply sit back and wait. If Kaguya really was still around, then he'd be ready for her, and whatever her plan was.